Hello, I'm very excited for today. I'm joined by ex-Scotland Yard detective and whistleblower of police child abuse cover-ups. I got it right.
Oh, yeah.
It's Mr. John Wedger. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Jim.
It's come all the way from London to see us, and I'm just made up he's been on. So what's going on, John?
Well, thank God for the lockdown, because the M6 was clear, first time.
I saw your live stream in London, and the streets was empty.
You've never ever seen it like that. It's just unbelievable. It's just, it's bizarre. When it first started, the lockdown back in March, you know, I've been on the street every single day. The City of London, there's a street in there, I think it's called Queen Elizabeth Street or Queen Mother Street, I don't know, I can't remember now. It's a main thoroughfare through the City of London, probably the busiest road in Europe. And you could basically have a picnic there. There was no one. And it was eerie, it was spooky, it was very weird. Very weird.
It's like you're on a film set these days, isn't it? Laugh, and you go to the supermarket, everybody's masked up and things. I can't believe everybody's kind of bought it.
Well, I can't believe that this has happened. So I can't believe this has happened in such a small space of time. It's weird.
Yeah.
You know, how everything is just done like a 180. Boom. People's standards, people's attitudes. You know, it's horrible.
Do you think the mask is a symbolic thing rather
massively,
than... Yeah.
Massively. You can't hear what people are saying. It's blocking communication.
Yeah.
And it's just horrible.
Yeah.
It's not how we should be living. And none of it makes sense. I'm not denying some sort of virus, you know. Maybe I had it. I was very ill at the beginning of the year, but I got over it. But when you look at the figures, you know, the recovery rate and the death rate, you know, the recovery rate is phenomenally high and the death rate is phenomenally low.
Yeah.
And so why are they doing this? I don't get it.
It's the devil, isn't it?
Man.
Dimension.
Oh, well, we'll be going into them dark realms.
John's got his whiteboard and his felts, and we're going to be explaining stuff to you in a bit about that. But basically, it's a serious episode. It's not going to be funny. We're going to be talking about child abuse, paedophile rings, and SRA, which is Satanic Ritual abuse, which John has been investigating for. How many years, John, have you been investigating?
With the child abuse, I've been doing it many, many years. You know, sort of probably over 2 decades with my police career. And with my police career, I never wanted to go into the child abuse thing. That was basically seen. It sounds really horribly sexist, but a woman's job when I first joined child protection. It turned out that it's probably the most important investigative avenue ever to deal with. And hopefully, I will go on about the statistics and how much of society's ills are linked into child abuse. The Satanic SRA, oh my word, I dealt with it in the police, but it was mainly indigenous beliefs. London being the most diverse city, one of them in the world, you know, without a doubt in Europe, you know, and an empire, you know, sort of place that the UK is, you know, it is so mixed. So we used to get a Jamaican belief system called OPEA, which is a form of witchcraft, form of voodoo. I've dealt with stuff from the Congolese community, Santeria, which is like a Latin American, South American dark belief system. But satanic ritual abuse, as I've got to know it now in the UK, never really come across it, albeit it did form the syllabus of training for detectives going into child abuse at the time.
Okay.
So you had cases in the Orkney Islands, there was one in Cleveland, there's been a few, you know, jotted down which have been cited and do form part of the training syllabus. But I never really knowingly, and I say that knowingly, come across it. Knowing what I know now, I was treading in and out of it constantly. Right. And I think ultimately my whistleblowing was going towards exposing it. That's why they had to come down on me. Since I've done that, it was one person spoke about it. I know that Bill Maloney from Pie Mash Films was always talking about it.
Yeah.
You know, again, a phenomenal individual, you know, and God bless Bill. Wilfred Wong, who probably is the authority on satanic ritual abuse in the UK and has investigated it for nearly 3 decades, he would tell me, you know, about the prevalence of it. And, you know, one came forward, and that was maybe 1 in 10 of the survivors. I give testimony to victims and survivors of abuse, but now it's predominantly satanic ritual abuse. Yeah. But there's a huge health warning with it. It's a belief system, it's spiritual belief, it's negative deity worship, And I say to people, you know, I don't care what anyone believes. You know, I believe in God. I believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
And some people say, "Oh, I don't." It's not really of any importance. What is of major importance is that these people believe in their deity worship. It's ancient. It goes back to Babylonian times. It predates everything. It's very dark. It's very sinister, and it's very, very real. And it's alive and well in the UK. And it probably really is the foundation of so much of organised abuse that we encounter.
It's kind of worrying because Satanism now seems to be normalised. I mean, a lot of music videos and films have got very dark now. And I even saw in Wigan, in this backwater, there's a satanic... Somebody's on Facebook, there was a satanic group started. And that really like kind of... because this is like back and beyond. And when it's reaching kind of here... You know, it's kind of worrying. It's kind of like the end times, isn't it, where it becomes acceptable. And they try and fashion. There's even TV shows called Lucifer.
I know. It's alluded to in so much of media. And we see the symbolisms, you know. I mean, one part of their deity worship is Moloch, which is the owl.
Yeah,
we see the owl symbolised everywhere. It's on the heraldry of the Birkbeck College, which
I saw your live stream.
You know, and there's quite a few places got the owl symbolised everywhere, but you will get those, you know, that are thoroughbred intergenerational Satanists, and you know you will be interacting with these people day in day out, and you'll never really know fully what their dark secret is. But then you will get the others. You will get the inquisitorial ones that do it because it's funny, it's trendy, it's a bit of rebellion, the heavy rock music.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them don't really fully understand
what they're messing about
what they're doing, and they don't fully understand the depth of depravity that Satanists will go to. And once they find out, I think they would run a mile, you know, and they would seek help because you are opening spiritual doors which need closing.
Yeah.
Because you will be tormented.
Yeah.
And again, there'll be people shaking their heads, well, it's not. Well, it's irrelevant. We are at an epoch in our time when our society is saturated in this, and it is a destruction of the soul of a child, and it is. And you know, hopefully as we go on, I can really show the disparity between the two communities, as it were, between those that have been abused on an interfamilial and an institutional basis. We had a lot of kids that were placed into the care system throughout the 50s, 60s and 70s. It was a massive sort of industry, really. These huge care homes were set up, and they were preyed on by paedophiles.
Yeah.
And then you'll get the other side, which is satanic ritual abuse. And the victims, I think the root cause of all of it is a pure evil. Anyone that wants to, you know, sexually interfere with a child is doing the devil's work. They don't do it alone. They will be doing it with a lot of demonic attachment. You know, when I say to people, stop it, stop what you're doing. It's so bad. You have no idea what you're doing. But those that have been affected directly by satanic ritual abuse, the children that have gone on to survive this, they develop a thing called DID, which is dissociated identity disorder.
Is that similar to MK Ultra? You know, the
it's a mind control. There is a mind control element to it, and then you'll have the multiple personalities, the DID, and it's heartbreaking, and it truly is heartbreaking, and it's very, very real.
Irreversible.
Well, people do come out of it. There's a fantastic therapist called Carolyn Bramhall, and I'll put you in touch with Carolyn. And she's one of the premier sort of therapists in this. And it's a way of amalgamating the different alters, as they call them. And a child will develop an alter because of the torture. But with the torture becomes the ability to mind control. And to subliminally program them, but also speaking out. It's, you know, you've got a lot of experiential memory that will go along with speaking out. So if they speak out or they make a noise, even when they are being sexually abused and tortured, they will be punished. Yeah. So the mind knows not to, you know. So there will be an alter for being drowned, for instance. So the child will develop this alter that will take over when they're being drowned, because drowning is very big in that community. They are electrocuted, they're electric shock treatment, they are brought to the point of death and beyond, you know, they are revived, They have doctors involved. It's highly thought out. So there'll be an altar that will deal with electricity. And one person said there's one called Sparky, and Sparky will protect her from you know. Carolyn will tell you about one of her altars called Panda, for example. And I said, well, Panda, how does... Because they're very childish, because they protect the child.
Yes.
So what they have to do is get the person, she said, one of the therapists, and again, I'm not an expert on this. I'm learning all the time, and I know a lot, you know, but I'm not an expert. So some people that have got DID and going through the process, don't attack me. I'm trying to get this out here. So it might be, but she said, Panda is wears black and white. I went, hence the name Panda. So it turns out Panda is actually a doorman. So Panda is the doorman that protected her. So when she was being attacked physically, her altar, Panda would come, and Panda was 7 foot tall.
Yeah.
It's an imaginary friend, if it were, that wore black and white. And she goes on to say how she picked someone up, a man up. She's tiny. Honestly, she's smaller than this little model there. She's the smallest woman in the world, Carolyn. And she picked a grown man up and threw him, because it was Panda that was doing it. So you have to bring the altars forward and then just say, look, she's all right now. She's grown up. You can leave her. But also, when the altars go, the pain and the emotion comes back.
Yeah.
So it will protect them from pain and emotion. So sometimes there might be reluctance to get rid of that, because, and also sometimes altars, there might be an altar that's loyal to the satanic abuse as well, because this is what they do. So at the moment that altar needs to leave, it can invoke suicidal tendencies.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking when you meet people that have got it, and you sit there and think, how could your parents have done this to you, and why? And when you see what they do to children, you know, making them eat feces and urinating on them, it's depravity, sex with animals. And I said to one survivor of it, what were the adults doing? She said they were laughing while she was in a cage, whilst a dog was raping her. They were, her mother and her father and all the others were laughing. And she said there were senior policemen there were doctors there were lawyers there was even priests there. So and again, devil worship, Satanism, you know, their deity is a liar, the great deceiver. You know, he comes to deceive. So if you ask them, are you doing it? Well, what are they going to say? Yeah, oh yeah, you got me, hands up. It's all a lie. And the nearest thing we ever saw, really, and I really want to sort of push this, is a thing called the Rains List.
I actually, one of the people on my live stream put me onto this, Padge, thank you very much. And it's you can actually see this online, the Rains List, can't you? Yeah,
it's an acronym, Ritual Abuse Information Network Survivors, I think, something like that. And it was formulated by a leading psychotherapist and psychiatrist and psychologist called Dr. Joan Coleman. And she was a world leader in her field. And she was dealing with people that were going into residential care for mental health problems. And back then, it was never really sort of alluded to much about the DID and things like that. They were just nutted off, basically. And people were displaying the same sort of behaviour, but also were saying the same things. And there's one thing I will say about Satanism, it is incredibly uniform. You know, it's a bit like if you go into a McDonald's anywhere,
the same experience,
the same thing. It's the same as this, and there is a reason for that, because it's what their deity wants. So they will keep this absolute continuity, because they will be invoking negative spirits and things like that. And I can speak so much about the reasons for it, and hence the board there. You know, but the Rains List, this woman, people were sort of giving her information and saying, look, I'm taken, you know, at night to this forest, or to an abattoir, or to an abortion clinic, or a hospital. There's all different. I've heard of the British Legion clubs being used, military bases being used, Salvation Army, pubs, you know. And hopefully as we go on, I'll want to sort of explain graphically the hierarchy of
when
the
you
system.
feel the need to get bored.
I think, you know, I'll go on a little bit about how I got there first, and then I'll go into that. But what she was doing was, people were saying these places and these names, and they were all coming up with the same name in the same places. So she started to formulate a list, this Rains List. And a name would only go on there if more than 2 people independently mentioned, without any prompting or any collusion, they mentioned the same person, the same location. So we're looking at more than 2, so 3 people on the whole. Some will mention the names more, others mentioned the name once, and therefore it won't in. So there's an extensive list, and there is this published list, and there are actors, there are politicians. There was one of the senior officers on the unit I was working on in the police, on the vice unit, is named on there. There's a chief constable and an assistant chief constable in the area where a lot of this abuse was going on, which was Hampshire, on there. And I've started a campaign right into all these regulatory bodies for, like, the doctors, for the police, saying, are you aware that this person was on the list? If so, is it not a conflict of interest? Was there any mention of it? There's a raft of questions. And again, this list is what she made, so it's not an official government list, so they can ridicule it. They try to, but it stands on its own. It holds water. And I've written to the IOPC, the Independent Office of Police Complaints, and I've named this one officer from the Metropolitan Police, and I said, look, this guy's been mentioned in this list as being an active member of a cult. I then gone to say how his name ended up on the list. So, at least 2, maybe more people have mentioned him as being on it. This man is drawing a police pension. It is against the codes of conduct to be a member of a cult. Right, and I want you to know that satanic abuse will require their participants to partake in the following. And I've lifted a raft of, and then cross-referenced it with some of my work and other work in there. And the IOPC, the arbitrary body for police complaints, and again, a public body as well, I've written back and said, John Wedger, if you write to us again, we're not going to respond. Do not write to us again. So again, I'm starting up another thing for people to write into the IOPC with absolute outrage, because this is wrong. So, but this is where we are now. This is where we are now. And, the John Wedger Foundation, which we set up, a little while back, we're just sinking under the weight. Inundated. And we're very lucky. So I'm going to give a big shout out to a lady called Louise Dickens, whose grandfather...
He's here today in the corner.
Whose grandfather was Geoffrey Dickens, the MP. Was it for Rochdale, was it?
Lbry and Saddleworth.
Saddleworth, yeah, right. In Yorkshire, who was one of the only MPs to ever speak out about satanic abuse, and was ridiculed beyond belief for doing so. And I know how he feels, because it's just incredible. But it's been a long, hard path to get here.
Have you had lots of threats to shut up? A lot of death threats. And,
I had one the other day. I was told by a former Satanist that you will be killed. John Wedger, you will be killed. You need to take this seriously, but keep speaking out. The former Policing and Crime Minister, Sir Mike Penning, stood in Parliament in front of the current, or not current now, but back then, 2 years ago, the Nicholas Hurd, the current Policing and Crime Cabinet Minister, and 5 members of Theresa May's staff. He stood up and said, I'm surprised John Wedger's here and he hasn't been killed. And he openly stated it. I've had head of the CIA covert operations contacted me. CIA covert operations contacted me and said, how the hell are you still alive? I've had a former intelligence officer for MI6 contacted me and said, John, you're lucky. You are lucky to even be here. So I've had it constantly. But what I will say is, if ever you meet anyone who's got a purpose in life and is driven, I think it's me, because every moment I wake up, I know this is what I have to do. The world needs to know what is going on. And when you look at abuse of children, people scratch their heads and they think it's just an isolated incident, and they don't realise the connectivity of all of this. And you think, how can people abuse children and get away with it? And then you investigate it, and then you're shut down, and then you're threatened. So you build a bigger picture, and then you start realising that this isn't a local issue, it's a regional issue, it's a national issue, it's an international issue. So you put paedophilia into the mix, and it answers a lot more questions, but there's still gaps. And then you put Satanism into the mix, and you have the full jigsaw.
Yeah.
You know.
The upper echelons of society, it's endemic through it though, and it's every organisation at the top is corrupt.
But there is a reason. There is a reason why. I mean, it is organised criminality. I mean, this far surpasses the drug cartel networks, the arms trading networks. You know, the real fuel, you know, is the children, and there is a reason. And the children are worth a lot of money. They're worth a lot of money. And there's a need to keep society dysfunctional and broken. We are seeing a deliberate erosion of family values like never before. There's third world countries that would not treat their children the way we do. And we're meant to be a developed, God-fearing nation, and we're far from it.
A lot of behaviours are being normalised now, aren't they?
Of course
I don't want to mention certain organisations, but sexual perversion kind of thing is being... It's being brought to the fore and made trendy, and you know what I mean.
Of course,
like it's just a laugh choice rather than something.
And we see it. There was a video. I think it was put out on one of the children's channels. I don't know whether it was Nickelodeon or it was a Disney channel, and it was a group of men with these pyramid hats on, all in black, and they're bashing babies' heads in to music. And if people are so stupid to see that it isn't got its roots purely in the demonic, it was so overt.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had Disney films which are blatantly promoting in Satanism. We are seeing it, like you say, in the Netflix genres.
Yeah.
You know, and what they are doing, they are making it satirical. I mean,
satirising.
Satirising everything. I mean, there's a really well written and funny BBC comedy called What We Do in the Shadows.
Okay.
And it's about a team of vampires.
Right.
And it's funny, but then when you break it down, it's deeply demonic.
Yeah.
And it's totally anti-Christian, you know? And you're sitting there thinking, how is this? And this is how they're doing it. And, you know, they're just ploughing ahead with it. But if we don't stop this, we don't expose this. Now, the devil's greatest weapon is that people no longer believe in him. And our other biggest weapon is the fact that it's our silence. You know, so we need to speak out.
Yeah.
We need to speak out, because if they truly believe in what they're doing and they're proud of what they're doing, then okay, then go on camera and show the world what you're doing. You know, put out on the internet where your rituals are going to be.
Yeah.
Let's bring cameras along. Let's invite arbiters along to monitor, you know, your religious beliefs, your spiritual beliefs. You know. And it's not just people sitting in there doing all the pagan, the oak tree worship and that. There is a reason why they do it. They rape and sodomise children. Yeah. We hear this testimony after testimony. They do that for a reason. They hunt the children in the woods. We get that alluded to a lot. And ultimately, they want the blood. The blood is what they want. They like the blood.
Is the adrenochrome a myth? Or do you think the adrenochrome is an actual...
It's a name now that is bandied about. But back then, you know, it would have just been the frightened child, the blood, you know. And I mean, one woman, she told me that she was... they get what they also get. They get the children that are involved, and they use them to kill the babies as well. So you're going to get conspiracy of silence, you know. And I've had quite a few victims of it saying, "I've killed a child," and they've gone to the police. I mean, Audrey Harper, the author of Dancing with the Devil, she openly admits to the fact that she was used to cut a baby's throat, and she's gone to the police about it.
I was watching an interview, it might have been with Sean Atwood you did, and he told a story about, I think it was a child prostitute on the streets of London. Yeah. And a white Rolls Royce came past, and somebody said, "Whatever you do, don't get in that car." Yeah. Am I backing up the wrong tree?
Well, you're merging two stories, but no, I can expand on that. There was a guy many years ago. I mean, I started looking into this in about 2000, and I was asked to track down transient paedophiles, and I just thought, okay, I don't mind. And there were sex offenders that had gone to live on the canals, and it will come back to what you just said. So I had a lovely detective sergeant. He said, "John, you know, get out there." He said, "The paedophile unit want to know how many they've got. They've just brought in the Registry Act, where sex offenders had to register." I'll draw this out for you. Actually, this is quite interesting, and this shows how they get away. So you had to register as a sex offender within the policing district where you resided within 28 days. Otherwise, you're going to get arrested, and then you're in trouble. You could be recalled to prison. So the police needed to know. So it was a major step forward. So that is good legislation. So when they say, look, we need new laws, we've got good laws. They just need enacting. We don't need chief constables and commissioners
closing cases and just
protecting paedophiles or that are involved in Satanism, which we have had. And they said, look, the intelligence from the prison service that's going through to the paedophile unit at Scotland Yard is that there are two sex offenders living on canals, on narrowboats. And they said, get in there and have a look. So I went in and had a look. Well, within a month I found 90. Okay. And it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I was working, seconded by the National Crime Squad, as it was back then. The National Criminal Intelligence Service, that's who seconded me, to look on it, not as a London problem, but as a national problem. We found that there was a loophole allowing these sex offenders to continue living on canals. Yeah. And what happened then was I was removed, and the senior officer come down and said, right, John, you're off. I went, well, what do you mean I'm off? He went, no, we can't afford to second you anymore. I went, well, that's a nonsense, because, the unit I went back to did nothing. Sod all, They didn't even nick themselves shaving, as we'd say, And in the end, he said, look, I owe it to you because you're a good copper. And he said, I'll tell you what, he said, it's come from high up. There is, it's got to shut down, because we started then encroaching on people that are in the political forum and all that. And I want to show you how this formulates. So I've got my little whiteboard. Thank you so much.
Just have no problem. Colin, will you see there's no reflection, so it's all right for John? It should be all right, shouldn't it?
Right, so you tell me when you're ready.
It should be all right. You can always close into this, can't you, with Wigan technology?
So we've got to look at, right, there's a thing called geographical profiling, Jimmy, right? Okay. And crime happens for a reason, and there's certain areas will be used for crime. I want to pull myself forward there, I don't want to get away from you. And so you put in many, many factors. Now, why did London have so many sex offenders living on canal boats? So I started looking into geographical profiling, and it sort of answered a hell of a lot, Okay. And so what we got London. London is it's pretty much a circular sort of thing. So here's London, right? Okay. So I'll hold that up. That's London, all right?
Can you see that all right?
And here we have different counties. So we have Hertfordshire now. Right, so I'm writing upside down, but Hertfordshire. Here's Essex, where all the old EastEnders ended up. And down there, I'm trying to do I don't know, it's a state, but that's Surrey.
No worries.
And here we got Kent, right? So now Hertfordshire will be its own policing district, right? Hertfordshire Police. Essex will be its own policing district. Kent will be its own, and Surrey be its own. But London is a bit different. Now, running through the centre of London is the lifeblood of London, and it's the River Thames. So it sort of basically does this, and then it sort of does. Everyone's sort of familiar
EastEnders
with the EastEnders thing, the old. Right, so let's look at. Right, that's the Isle of Dogs, and here you've got the docks, the old Royal Docks, and.
So we all that kind of straight up, so we can see
it.
Right. Like that. So do you want me to hold it for you, John?
Sorry. Yes, all right, that works. So that's the River Thames. Now we then start looking at London, and London isn't one policing district. It's made up, I think, of about 24 different boroughs, right? Okay. So we'll have all these little boroughs. No, I'm going to do that in another colour. I'm going to do that in green. They gave me coloured pens, so I'm going to use them.
Yeah. Tilt it down a bit.
Right.
Just tilt it down ever so slightly. Tilt like that.
Right, sort of like that.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry.
Yeah.
So what we got now, we got these different boroughs. And that's no good. I'll go back to black. Be like Amy Winehouse. Back to black. Here we go. So we've got these little boroughs all around here, right? And there's 24 of these things. And we've got the City of London, which is its own jurisdiction. I'll come on to that bizarre place later. So we've got all these boroughs. And like I said, there's like 24 of them.
Okay.
And each one will be its own policing district.
Right.
And through the centre of that, you've got, over here, you've got like the River Lee that comes in all the way to Essex. Then you've got the canal network which sort of comes in, and then it sort of goes out there, and it goes off here, and it goes out that way. And that really that was the arterial roads of the day, built in the 1700s.
Okay.
They're still in use now, the canals, and it's a tremendous bit of civil engineering, right? Now the canals, right, are so old.
Yeah, I'll just tilt it a bit.
So these canals, so this in the Blues of Clouds, they're so old that they form parish boundaries, which went on to be borough boundaries.
Okay.
So in certain parts, for example here, that's a bit geographically incorrect. So, right, so say there, this epicentre here,
yeah,
that's an area called Springfield Marina in the East End of London, and you've
Okay.
got 3 boroughs meeting there. Yeah, it is 3 boroughs. You've got Hackney, Waltham Forest, and Newham meet. So in there, if you've got a little canal boat there,
you had access to all of them.
well, all you've got to do on your 27th day, you're meant to register. If you're in the borough of Hackney, which is here, all you've got to do is move your boat a couple of metres, and you're on the banks of.
Right.
So you get another 28 days.
Just moving.
Yeah,
around.
another one is here. That's Southall, right in the west side of London. Again, you've got 3 boroughs merged in this same area, and again, the boat can just flip between there. They're under policed, these canals, because they're the industrial sort of area which is no longer used.
Okay.
So really, unless someone they would get the odd rape or something like that on there, you know, the canal rapists or whatever, you know, you're always alluded to on these crime films. But on the whole, no one went down there, and they were just seen as a little walkway. Now, I won't be too long. I don't want to ruin your arms there, Jimmy. But
Don't worry, I'm like that Schwarzenegger.
So if you've got a canal boat, you can live quite happily, and of course you go out to open water there, you can go out, and it's very rarely policed. So you can literally move about with total impunity, and we were found in areas like here and here, you're having a high concentration of paedophiles.
Yeah.
Because they knew about this loophole. But at the same time, the one of the channels, BBC or ITV, brought out a kids programme called Rosie and Jim.
All right.
And it was what it was doing. It was popularising living on canals,
Okay.
right? And so you would find that paedophiles, when you start to search their homes, there'd be certain things they would put in their homes, you would recognise them instantly as a paedophile.
All right.
There'd be certain paintings that they would use.
Okay.
One of them, I don't know if you ever see a painting from back in the 70s, you'd see it quite a bit, and it's of like a fireplace with 2 children stood facing the fire, and they're naked, a boy and a girl, and you just get their backs, like their bare back and their bare bums.
I think I can.
Yeah.
Similar to the Crying Boy.
The Crying Boy is another one.
Really, yeah.
The Crying Boy was another one. You would find Action Men would be placed in so you didn't get them pictures on a boat, but you would get them in houses. On the boats, you would get Action Men, you would get Rosie and Jim dolls, and it's a lure. And it's another way of other paedophiles recognising everyone. So it's an ancient symbolism that you saw on shops years ago.
Yeah.
Right? So kids would be drawn to it. And there were a lot of kids that had issues, would like to go down the canal, it's peaceful and that. And of course they would then fall prey to these people. And some were running respite for special needs kids. You know, and we found quite a couple of them on the canals, these people that were giving respite to special needs kids, and they were registered sex offenders, very dangerous category A sex offenders. With, you know, and one of them, there was a canal boat that was running from Regent's Park, was running from Camden Town about here along to Regent's Park to the zoo, sort of around this way, right? It's getting a bit of a mess now, and schools were going on these boats, and the lad, the deckhand, that was in charge of giving himself the job as toilet monitor, taking the kids to toilets, was a very, very dangerous sex offender and was convicted on 2 occasions of it. And no one knew, you know. So this is what I was looking at, you see. So I'll put it down now. So it was highly, highly successful operation, and of course it was shut down. Now, when I first started looking into it, I remember reading my local newspaper.
Yeah.
And there was a guy there had written a book, and it was called No Human Touch, a guy called Paul. And he was in a local paper, and it was his account of being abused in the care homes.
Yeah.
And he was calling out to victims and survivors to speak up and come forward. So he was a pioneer, really, where I'm concerned, because I never really come across it. And he'd put his phone number, and I looked at the code on it, and it was the same number in the town I lived in.
Okay.
So I rang him up, and it turned out he lived half a mile away. He said, look, I'm not a weirdo, John. I've been to prison all my life, but through crime and violence. I've been badly abused, but I would never ever touch a kid. I'm safe hands. I want to help. You know, I told him I was, and I said, have you got a problem with it? He said, no. He said, come and see me, please come and see me. So he was the first victim and survivor who educated me on how kids are preyed on. And his story was horrific. He was a heroin addict, and he even came forward. I started setting up these educational workshops for the police, and to teach them. I was the only one doing it in the time, teaching the police exactly what to look for. And he was coming in and he was speaking out. And of course, the senior management stopped that. And he turned around and he said, you know, I was in the care home, raped from the age of 4, pimped out, you know, on the streets of London, doing drugs. And he said, one day, he said, I'm in Piccadilly, which used to be the meat rack. You know, it was termed the meat rack. And the boys were classed as chickens. If you ever want a full insight into it, read Anthony Daly's Playland, a fantastic book.
Okay.
And it really shows how politicians were involved, and seniority in the police were involved, and the vice unit again were involved. We keep hearing the vice unit, and I really want to push this point because the police need to address this, and I think there needs to be a public inquiry into the officers that they've had working on there, because kids have been killed as a result of, I believe, mismanagement on this unit. Right, and he said, I went out one day and this white Rolls Royce would always come round, and it had 2 men in it. And he said it came round one day and it parked up, saw me, and they recognise each other. It's like a criminal recognises a criminal. You know, a street kid will recognise a street kid.
Yeah.
A paedophile will recognise a vulnerable kid.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they will. And again, I will go into that, the regions and how these people are sort of given areas, locations. It's like a military operation. And the door opened for him to get in, and he went and he said his pimp, and again, I don't apologise for these terms.
No.
This is not a seminar in semantics, Jimmy. This is reality. And if people are going to nitpick on me saying prostitution and pimps, then really, you shouldn't be watching this podcast at all.
Mark, I do very open, man.
Yeah, because I'm on the good side here,
Yeah,
you know, and that's that. So if I say anything that might be,
no, don't worry about that. Right?
You know,
it's all
not correct, get over yourself. We're dealing with the rape and the murder of children here. You know,
Yeah.
you shouldn't be hung up on words here. So, and his pimp grabbed him and went, "Don't get in that car." And he went, "Why?" He said, "Because the last 2 boys that got in that car, we ain't seen them again." So he said he was rattling. He said, "I was rattling with the downcoming of drugs." He said, "I wanted to get my fix."
Yeah.
So he went, okay, to placate his pimp. And he said, my pimp didn't make money out of me. He said he actually protected me. I was going to get raped anyway. I might as well get paid for it and have freedom than be beaten and got nothing, you know. And so, but he gesticulated to the men in the car, go around the block. So he backs away, his pimp goes off to do whatever, car comes back round, he gets in.
Okay.
He jumped in this car, he is taken to the Hampstead region. And again, Hampstead, we see this region crop up time and time again. It's what's called the moral high ground of London. It's on the hills of northwest London, incredibly affluent area. The main gay cruising area is in Hampstead, and again, there is no correlation here between that community. I want to make that clear. There's a lot of people from the gay community that are working closely with me and help me with a hell of a lot. So, and they know that. They know that. So, hello to Martin. Martin, I always give Martin a shout out.
Hello, Martin. I've never met you, but hello.
Yeah, you know, and you know, and this Hampstead Heath area is very synonymous with illicit sex. You know, open sex. And the police are deliberately told to stay away from it, right? Not to police it. Now, if this was heterosexual sex that was happening in the open, which we do get with the red light areas, it will be heavily policed. And I know that because I was on the vice units. Whereas this area was always, don't go there, don't go there. And I want to evidence that statement a bit later, if I may.
Of course.
Right. They were taken to a very, very wealthy mansion, as he calls it, gated area, and he said the next thing he knows is that his basically lifeless corpse is being dumped outside the local Royal Free Hospital in Hampstead. And he said over 3 days they raped and tortured this boy to such a degree that he spent months in hospital reconstructing his anus and his bowels. And he said all he remembers is waking up and these two men were putting on suits to go to a wedding. He said there was blood everywhere. He was bleeding. He said he can remember that they were wrapping up a parcel for as a wedding present for their family while he was lying there dead. And they were discussing what to do with his body. And they said, and he made a twin, so he said, well, if there's any life, the hospital can have him. And they dumped his body near the hospital. He survived, but severe injuries. Now, we roll forward. I've done a podcast, and I want to get into how I got into the podcasting thing, if I can, Jimmy, I did a podcast with a very, very brave survivor of horrific abuse called James Reeves. James Reeves is a phenomenal man that's really come through adversity, and he would also go on about when he was on the streets and he was abused in the care homes. Again, there was always structure to the abuse. It was so well worked out. And one of the other things I want to dispel, Miss, is here that the public perception of a paedophile is not like a white middle-class man who lives with his mum.
Yeah.
Albeit, when you look at photos of paedophiles, they do tend to look like what we call a nonce. However, when you get testimonies of people that have been involved in the real organised abuse, women hold a very big part in it, and they actually override the men in sexual abuse of children when it comes to satanic abuse.
Really?
And it will be every race, colour and age group will be involved. So it's dispel that myth now. That is marginalisation, and it is not
acceptable.
What they will do, they will put this perception of what a paedophile looks like, I think, as a massive distraction tool.
I mean, just interject though. When you see these paedophile sting gangs who post up, it's always people. They always, you kind of get the image that the paedophile is like a bit slow.
They're damaged people.
Yeah, that's the image they put out there.
Yeah, and you can see that the ones they, I like the paedophile hunter groups. I'm not a fan of live streaming it.
No,
let's have fairness. Have the footage, but make that for a trial. Don't put it out on live stream. They're going to have a murder sooner or later, and they're going to end up getting nicked, and it'll put an end to it.
I think some of them do it for the hits and the viral viewings rather than just the actual.
Yeah, and the problem you get with the podcasting and all that and the popularity, you've got to check the ego.
Yeah.
And the ego runs amok sometimes, and you see that with a lot of podcasters now that are really doing well. Some of them now, one of them told me not to mention his name when I speak out because he gets trolled. And I'm thinking, well, do you know what? Go away, mate. And because it's all about him as a business. This is we got to keep everything in perspective. But James was telling me that he was working with a little group of lads that would meet at Euston train station, and they would splinter off wherever needed, and then come back. And he was always going on about Ted Heath being a prolific paedophile, and we've seen that. And I will go on a bit more about Ted Heath as we progress. And he said one day he was meant to meet the group of 5. It was Christmas, and he was late, and they'd already gone out to do their work, as it were. And he said, I never saw any of them again. He said, I know they were killed.
All of them.
All of them, yeah. And he holds a little vigil every year for them at the train station. He goes down and says a little prayer. So if we then look at James, because he would never be believed. He would be classed as a liar. They would pull his social services reports, his care home reports, where if he did report anything, he's a fictional, whatever. There's a word for it. Fantasist. That's it. Fantasist and a liar and a troublemaker. So straight away they're getting these tags, not to be trusted, and that you'll see that will stick throughout their lives. We saw that with the Cole Beach trial. Where he was classed as a fantasist. In my opinion, the man's a victim and survivor of abuse. he might not be the best example of a victim and survivor, and he might be a questionable man with a questionable criminal history of offending against children.
Okay.
I'm not making any excuses for the guy. You know, I think he was a registered sex offender, but there was a child there, a wounded child that was abused, and they've used the Bad Character Act against him, which is something that they brought in 2003 to, I believe, to deliberately demonise the victims and survivors. So Audrey Harper, who wrote the book Dances with the Devil, Audrey was a street prostitute, an active Satanist, because she was dragged into Satanism, and she was used to procure children from the street, right, for sex parties, for coven members. So she said the children that were abused didn't actually get involved in the rituals, but they were procured to facilitate the sexual desire of these paedophilic members of the Satanic group, which is basically all of them. And she said we'd go around, offer them money and drugs, and James would say that they were picked up and taken at parties. So it ties in with that, ties in with what Anthony Daly says. And I did a podcast with one of who's now a very valued member of our team, a girl called Nikki. She worked on the street as what they call a clipper, and I've actually arrested Nikki many times in the past. Me and Nikki work closely together now. So big up Nikki for what you do, phenomenal. And Nikki was telling me that when she was working on the street in the Soho area as a clipper, there was a police inspector for the local borough, local police station, West End Central, which covers Soho, who was actively going up to street girls and offering them £500 a time to procure a child for him.
So that's a lot of money to when you've got
back then in them days.
Still now, you're on the streets.
But when I spoke to a Satanist, an ex-Satanist, the other day, she said, "Well, that's very cheap." She said, "My day it was minimum £5,000." I said, "Yes, but this is street level procurement, you know." But this inspector, and there's a massive assumption, would have known the chief superintendent of the vice unit at the time, and this chief superintendent, because it's both vice issues, so. If he's working in an area with vice problems, which he was, this inspector at West End Central, he would have known his cohorts and his counterparts on the Central Vice Unit, which is what I was on. Now, this chief superintendent, and again, this is in a public domain docket, so I'm not going down the libelous routes with anything. I'm not going to name the guy.
No.
He has been named to the IPC. He is named on the RAINS list as an active Satanist. So we start seeing this picture of how this is. So if you look on it at a local level, it's just runaway kids going out stealing and causing mayhem. We start taking it a bit deeper. It's a rent boy racket. We take it deeper. There is a satanic organised network that is encompassing it. And the one thing that you will get when you're in a situation like myself, where you speak out against it, is the veracity of attack. And it comes, and it really is like you are thrown to a pack of wolves. It comes hard,
psychopathic.
It comes fast, you know. So I was, threatened, well, basically shut up on that. But then I left that unit that was dealing with the transient sex offenders, and I ended up moving on to the vice unit, which was a Scotland Yard unit, a very, very elite unit. You know, they were global, they travelled around the world, they were a centre of excellence for dealing with vice and child prostitution matters, you know. If we look at what we've seen coming out in the recent decade, really, about grooming gangs, I know we're in the north now, we're sort of the epicentre of a lot of these allegations. Let me say now that 80% of grooming and sexual exploitation is interfamilial. It starts in the home, or those with parental responsibility for the kids, i.e. the care homes or the fostering homes and things like that. So to say that it is Pakistani Muslim gangs, Kashmiri gangs, is highly inaccurate to put all that on them. And I think there may be an agenda behind that. Of
course, divide and conquer. Turn everybody against Muslims.
100%, 100% agree that. However, let's not dismiss that they are active. Of course. And they are active in areas which have concentration. But if you went to the East End of London, you would get Albanian gangs, you would get Lithuanian gangs. If we look at the history of so-called child prostitution, or prostitutes in general. We used to in London have the Maltese gangs, which took over from the Italian gangs, which then led into the Caribbean, Jamaican gangs, which then moved over to the East European gangs, the Polish, the Lithuanian, the Latvian, which has then moved from the Baltic gangs into the Balkan gangs. So now we're looking at, the Bosnian and the new kids on the block are the Kosovan, the Albanian. That's now morphing now into the Romanian and now moving into the Bulgarian.
Yeah.
So, there is this history of migration that goes with it, so I was looking in, I was asked to look into sort of like the street sort of kid thing, because allegations were being made that these children were coming forward and speaking out. There was one girl in particular, her name is Zoe, she's dead, that's why I can name her. She made a phenomenal disclosure that she was being pimped out. She's been pimped out by a woman, and the woman's name is Foxy, aka Fiona Walsh, who was convicted, the first conviction of child sexual exploitation under the new legislation, and I think she was given well over a decade, maybe 12 years imprisonment for it. And the police knew about this woman, what she was doing. She was procuring children that were from dysfunctional, vulnerable, and the care system, and backgrounds, So they get preyed on. So this is why there is a need to keep your family in check and have a fully functioning family, because as I will go on to shortly about the hierarchy of Satanism, how they will send people out to...
That you just made me think there, because there's also agendas to break down the family units. So the more broken families we have, the more prey there is for these elite Satanists.
I mean, when you look at testimonies of people that went into the care system, some were never abused because they came from tough families, and there was a dad that would come and visit. You might have they preyed a lot on the migrant families back in the 50s and 60s, the Irish and the Jamaican and the Caribbean islands, and so some of them were big tough Irishmen whose kids were in care, and then they knew if they touched their kid, they're going to get a great big Irishman come round or a big Jamaican boy come round. So some were left alone, but those that had no one coming for them, they got it. And then you've got those that were handicapped and couldn't speak or couldn't tell anyone, they got it even worse. So it's very, very organised. And when we look at the Shirley Oaks care home in South London, at one time they had 19 sex offenders or people known to be involved in paedophilia working there. So it was a network, it was an organised network. But coming back to the London scene, like I said at the beginning, London is one of the most densely populated cities in Europe. It ranks within the top 10 in the world, and it is the most diverse, ethnically diverse, I think, in the world. I think it's always the second one. It's it really is a mix. We've seen exposure of child sexual exploitation, as they term it now, child prostitution in Rotherham, Rochdale, Bradford, Luton, Slough, Reading. We have not had one case, not one case, and I want to say this about not one case from London. And there's a reason why. Because
under the carpet.
I was silenced.
Yeah.
Other officers have come forward, have been silenced, and they silenced us all in the same way. And this girl Zoe was in care. She was mentioning what was happening to her, and she said there's others, and she gave me another one and another one and another one, and they come from mainly from the poor backgrounds, but from every different sort of ethnic group. We even had Irish travellers in there. Asian girl, Jamaican girls, white girls, it was a mix, but the main thing was that they were kids subject to care orders mainly, and they were ranged from 9 years old right the way up, and they had been doing it under the nose of the police for well over 15 years. And I spoke out, and said, look, this is what's going on, and I was threatened. And I was threatened by someone. I'm in the civil courts for this case next year, so I'm not going to name names on this. I get attacked for naming names, but I don't care about that. I don't care about the attacks.
You're just playing it charade. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, you've got to cut your cloth accordingly, and you've got to survive an environment you're in.
Of course.
Our main thing is that we continue to go.
Yeah.
And a lot of people make the mistakes of gobbing off, and that's it. Well, it's the right thing to do. Well, it might be according to them, but in the long term, it's a wrong thing to do.
They tend to have heart attacks off all doing cliffs or something.
Yeah, you've got to be clever. And one of the things is you've got to also speak out as well, and sometimes shut up. So you've always got to use your intelligence above your emotions with this. You know, it's very. But I was threatened with the loss of my home, my children, and my job.
Yeah.
And the guy did it, very senior police officer, and he actually said to me, you know, you've got no idea what you're getting into.
Yeah.
And I didn't at that time. I knew that there were cover-ups because I was told about politicians were involved. I was told about a guy called Lbry that was involved.
Yeah.
And of course that's a public record as well. And a few others. And that they will do everything to shut it up. So I knew that there was a conspiracy of silence. So there is a conspiracy. And a conspiracy is in statute law. You know, the only people who can't conspire are husband and wife, and that's for obvious reasons. There's a duress issue. Everyone else, if you're going to commit a serious offence and you come together for a common purpose to commit that, you're committing a conspiracy, whether it be murder, armed robbery, whatever. So conspiracies are real. They're not a theory, they're a fact. But again, we all get demonised with this label conspiracy theory.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
You know, so I was threatened that you've no idea what you're dealing with. Now, I didn't. Then I was frightened, I was scared, but I now know what I was dealing with. I now know how deep this goes. I was told you've no idea, and I know now how deep this goes, and it goes right to the centre of the establishment.
It's kind of like the system of society is basically rotten to the core, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, but we live in a very compliant world. We acquiesce because we put faith in these people.
Yeah.
We put faith in our leaders, you know. I've heard so much about, you know, our political leaders, our politicians that have been put in the place of safeguarding, that have been active in paedophilia and Satanism. I mean, the greatest example of this is Ted Heath.
Yes.
Ted Heath, the British Prime Minister throughout the 70s, you know, and he was active in the rape of children. There was a lot, 6 very credible, trial-worthy victims come forward. To that standard, there was, I think, up to 40, you know, ancillary ones come forward, and the allegations range from rape to murder to Satanism. And a chief constable called Mike Veal at Wiltshire, he headed Operation Conifer, because that was the parliamentary home of Ted Heath, and he was the only chief constable, commissioner, whatever you want to term it, that has ever served the people in this country, in my opinion. The rest of them have failed. We need to have a massive independent inquiry into this. I think definitely the Metropolitan Police's commissioners, you know, need removing at once. They are deliberately failing the people, and subsequent ones have. Bernard Hogan Howe was then made a peer, and he become the peer with the jurisdiction for safeguarding children. That needs looking at, because I think that's highly questionable that he was given that role.
Yes.
We see it in the church as well. We saw Lord George Carey. We've got a campaign to have him removed because he was the Archbishop of Canterbury. Under his jurisdiction, immediate jurisdiction, was Bishop Peter Ball, who was basically sodomising, raping underlings under his control, and whipping and caning them and brutalising them. And one of his victims committed suicide, and he got protection from Prince Charles for 14 years. Prince Charles deliberately demonised, and that came out in the independent inquiry. Okay, so that's a public record on that. And George Carey, in my opinion, has perverted the course of justice because he knew about, you know, the nefarious activities of Peter Ball. Nothing was done to remove him, and he continued to go on to hurt children. So we're seeing failings at all this level. And again, back then it was dyspraxic. You know, in my cognitive process, I didn't understand why. I now know. I now know fully why. I work with so many victims and survivors of abuse. A lot of people on our sort of extended team have been in prison. Some for you know, category offences like murder, armed robbery. you know, but they are honourable people. They're just victims of a horrendous, you know, and the fact that they even get up in the morning, let alone go out, speak out and help others, is just a testimony to human resolve, you know, and that isn't even going near the victims and survivors of satanic abuse, you know. And when we look, if I may just, I know you've got something to tell me. If I just
no, it's fine. Yeah,
I
you've
just
got
want
the
to
floor,
cover
John.
the criminal justice element of this, Jimmy. You know, they've never got money to therapise and to heal people. No. One of the biggest methods of healing is having your voice and having justice. It surpasses everything. You speak out and have your say. You must have had it in a workplace where you hold on to
vindication.
Things. You stand up and you say enough, and I want my say. It's incredibly empowering. They've had this taken away from them deliberately. You know, there's never money to therapy. You know, these therapists work at 60 quid an hour. That is all right, but they ain't got money for that. But they've got money to give 450 quid an hour to a barrister to prosecute them, because 75 to 80% of our prison population come from abused childhood backgrounds. I'm not saying sexual abuse, but abused childhood backgrounds, you know. We have a recidivism rates within the penal system of 75 to 80%. It don't work. It don't, and it never has worked. You know, they are not healing the problem. They are just facilitating the money-making machine that is our criminal justice system. From cradle to grave, children are nothing but a cash cow. And it has to stop. It has to stop.
Yeah. What's it like living with all this knowledge? You know, like, did you have to sometimes have time, not a lot of time, mate, would you have to like shut your mind off to all the things you've been counted to and stuff like that? Has it scared you a bit?
Yeah. I mean, look, my fear is nothing compared to the fear of a child in that kid's home that's having that blanket pulled out from them. That's fear. That's what. So whatever I have to endure, do you know what? Suck it up and deal with it. Yeah. I've been given a calling, and Lou will tell you, you can't switch off. This is 24/7, and it is 24/7. You know, 3 times I've had people ring me up saying I'm going to kill myself, and actually go ahead and do it. You know, whilst on the phone. I've called the police around twice to an address.
These SRA survivors.
A mixture. You know, and so it goes on. I mean, there's others that need help. We're not the 5th emergency service, whatever, or the 4th emergency, or whatever it is. We're not, and people sometimes think we are. We've just really, we're the new kids on the block. So, you know, we're not therapists. No. I'm not a therapist. I'm not an advocate. You know, I'm just an ex-detective who wants justice. You know, and does not want children abused anymore. Yeah. You know, so we're having some phenomenal people help us out. Unfortunately, there are some people that have got a bit disgruntled, you know, with us, but we haven't got the facility and all that to go forward. But the one thing we have got is popular support, because what we're doing is calling out to such a huge percentage of society. You know, I get trolled a lot, but do you know what? It's a drop in the ocean compared to the support and love. I walk down the street, I go on the street daily, and I podcast on the street, I speak to people, I will go to the homeless and talk with them and get their testimonies, and I get hugs and pats on the back, and I get people saying, you must carry on, do not give up. And many times, every one of our team, we've had wobbles, we've like, can't deal with this anymore, got to stop. But then you'll get a call from someone and they'll say, you've saved my life. It's what you're doing that's actually given me hope. And they'll put you in touch with someone else who'll give a testimony, and you think, well, if they can endure that and get over it, then surely I can do my job as well. And, you know, we need to unify and work as one. We do. Unfortunately, the victimology sometimes means that people are triggered. You know, there's a lot of unresolved trauma. There's a lot of rejection issues. I'm an ex-detective, so I become like the emotional dartboard for a lot of people. And,
the shield comments. And,
all that. I mean, to be honest, that is so base level now. You know, and you get the same ones all the time coming up, John mentioned this and John, and it's just absolute, like, it's not even worth entering into. I
had questions, but I'm not even going to answer them, because I thought, well, end of the day, what are you actually doing apart from sat at your keyboard?
Oh, they do nothing.
You know, you're out there on the streets helping people.
And I'll call out to them. They cause nothing but division and disharmony. These are damaged individuals. One guy was always attacking me, and I found out he'd been convicted of 2 rapes. There was another one that was removed from an inquiry because he was grooming a 14-year-old girl, and they had a problem with me, you know. And it's just, and they even, there's a brave woman called Sam Baldwin, and her testimony is absolutely heartbreaking. And she's had trolls calling her prostitute. And there was another woman who'd lost her daughter, and she was getting the same thing, you know, vile stuff, vexatious, nasty. But this is what they are, they're trolls.
Yeah.
They are trolls for a reason, because they live in the dark and they cause disharmony and hatred and division. And they call out to very vulnerable people. They are the enemy, right, of the survivor. And they are. And they are actually doing the paedophile's job. Because of these trolls, and I don't need to name them. I mean, there's one at the moment that we are prosecuting. The police have taken the case on.
Okay.
And what they are doing is they are causing to disrupt and cause absolute division and disharmony to already traumatised and vulnerable people. And they do. A lot of the survivor groups don't last because of the infighting and the trolling. There's a whole plethora of psychological and other reasons why people do that, you know.
So is the trolling really bad? Is it quite intense?
Well, not for me.
Yeah.
Because I don't care for it.
Yeah. If you got
Yeah, because I'm used to it. But look, the hugs and the pats on the back far outweigh it. You know, it really is probably less than 1%. You know, but if you're a new kid on the block, it will probably destabilise you. But you know, it's not a problem. Look, we're exposing child abuse and Satanism. If we think that we are going to have a clear path, you know, unfettered and without disruption, then my God, we've got to be as thick as, a whale omelette for that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You know, of course, paedophiles don't want me doing this.
Yeah.
Satanists can't stand me doing this. So there's one group called Hampstead. They are a satanic group.
Okay.
And they will go out their way. They will transcribe this. They will go through everything, and they'll look for the smallest inconsistency. And, you know, and they'll say, right, John Wedger's a liar because he said this, he did that. And, you know, John Wedger works for the government. John Wedger, you know, there is one of them now that I sell camper vans and make a lot of money out of that. And that I've got a healing centre in Devon. One of them was that I've, get money from the government and I'm working with Bill Maloney in Spain because I've always got a tan, so they're saying I'm always flying with victims' money. I've got a tan because my father was Sicilian, so that's why I got a tan, you know. But you get it all the time, and you can't reason with the unreasonable.
No.
You know, these are moronic idiots that cause... So what I will say to people is, your enemy here, the survivors of the trolls, they are doing you the biggest injustice you'll ever get, you know.
Do you think some trolls are paid? Do you think
they could be. I mean, I would have thought the satanic ones are, without a doubt.
Yeah.
You know, without a doubt, the satanic ones are. But the others, that you know, these people, you know, I've called a couple of them out, and you know, but you know, we're sort of on top of them. And when you look at the comments, that all their profiles are hollow. There's nothing in their profiles. They never make themselves known. They're very cowardly people, and they do a lot of damage to victims and survivors. They do. Yeah. You know, but you're going to get but you're always going to get your dissenters. You're always going to get your opposition, and okay, that's rightly so. So you should, you know. And people, you know, are sometimes going to question what they do, but I will get it more than most because I'm an ex-copper. Of
course.
And everyone hates the old Bill, you know, and they do. But I don't care.
No.
I really, really don't care. When you get comments saying, you saved my life, what you're doing is really helping, and because of you, you know, I'll carry on. And then we'll get others coming forward. So what we're doing is massively important. Yeah. And our results speak for themselves, and they do. Huge response, you know, globally in what we're doing. You know, and if you take Louise's grandfather, Jeffrey Dickens, I mean, the amount of abuse he got, you know, throughout the 80s for exposing Satanism, you have to ask yourself why. Why would you attack anyone exposing Satanism and child abuse? Why?
There's like an old saying, isn't it? You don't come in for flack unless you're over the target.
Over the target, exactly.
You know what I mean? So obviously you're onto something. Otherwise, nobody bother. If you was a long crank on an hill shouting stuff, there'd be people that always.
I mean, some of it I laugh at. I mean, there's one that puts out videos against me, and I find them amusing because it's like a transgender thing. It just puts all makeup on, and I thought, well, at least she or he, I don't know how to refer to this person, makes the effort before they troll me. I feel quite honoured, you know, that they bother to do it.
Yeah.
The others just sit there with a roll-up fag, wheezing away, mouthing off.
I saw one, and I thought I'll click on the profile. And it's like a mental old cat lady, and I thought, well, what are you doing, love? I sat there with a cup of Bovril. And dressed with egg stains down, like, you know what I mean? He's doing nothing.
And that you'll get the same one, you know, and they'll be wheezing away, and so, you know, and then you'll look at their views, and they've had 200 views, you know, but I mean, we will get 1,000, 2,000 live hits, you know. You know, one of the videos we've done is 2.2 million. So you know, it's
going out
so
there,
and there's a lot of jealousy as well. You know, you're going to get it. So even respect to them, you know, it's best to put them to bed now because they're just a nuisance. That's all they are. They're a nuisance. You know, and we're going to get it because of the satanic stuff, and it's really when you go into the satanic.
Yeah.
And Wilfred Wong, hopefully you'll get to interview
I'd love
him.
to have if Wilfred's watching this, please could we get you on the show, please?
And Wilfred will turn around and he will say to you, look, if you're upset and Satanist, be happy. Be very, very happy. But this is where it takes a very, very dark turn. The satanic abuse. This is where you get another element. And I sort of understand it to a degree as much as I want to now, you know. And the level of depravity, I mean, it really is sinister. And the fact it is so ancient, you know. So, can I have a look back the other way?
Yeah, you know what? I was going to ask you, could I go to the toilet, but I didn't know what to do. Because I'd get people saying, oh, you've ruined it. You always ruin it by having a break. But we're just going to take a break now. We'll be back in a bit. Hello, welcome to part 2 of the podcast with John Wedger, the ex-Scotland Yard detective and police whistleblower. Thank you for coming back, John.
That's all right. You know, thank you to our barista.
Well, he does a good latte, doesn't he? Apparently, it's made with goat's urine and monkey feces, but we won't go there. You've got your whiteboard with you, and we're going to talk about the hierarchy of satanic.
Yeah. And it's a strange thing because when you go into this world of whistleblowing, I didn't want to work with children. I brought up 4 kids on my own. The last thing I wanted to do was deal with the dysfunction of other people's kids, let alone my own. And I understand the family courts. I spent 4 years in and out the family courts, so I've had a real grounding when it comes to kids, and it was the kids that sort of found me, as it were, you know. And I want to say something that when you stand up and you blow the whistle, you are the same as a victim and survivor because you stand alone, and the attacks are just monumental, not just from crazy trolling and that, but also from the establishment, and it comes from a very, very high place. And like you said earlier about being threatened, I mean, there was a chief officer that took on the case of the children that were abused, tortured and killed in a kids' home called Hope de la Garenne
in Jersey. And again, very dark undertones on that. Please watch Sun, Sea and Satan by Pie and Mash Films with Billy Maloney to see that this guy was Lenny Harper, and he actually features in Bill's documentary, and he speaks out and says, you know, kids were murdered here. Lenny, he was destroyed, you know. Was he a survivor of the...
Lenny is the chief officer that was investigating it. Now Lenny... what he did was he were getting these accounts where kids were saying that they weren't just being sexually abused in home, they were taken to a basement. Again, these basements feature all the time in abuse, and mainly satanic abuse. So there's always indicators as to where this is going. Okay. You know, not only were they abused, they were tortured. They were said they were handcuffed. You know, some were killed. There was bloodletting down there. Enough accounts were given that Lenny started to exhume this former children's home in Jersey. Now, islands feature a lot in child abuse because when you're on an island, where are you going to go? Kids were shipped in. This is why it's an industry, children. You can use cocaine once. You can use a child 1,000 times, and they do. And Lenny boldly stood up, and then the attack came from a very high establishment level to shut him up. When he exhumed the basement of this kids' home, there was blood staining on there. There was a bath, as mentioned by the victims. There were rusty manacles, like handcuffs were found. A cadaver dog, a body sniffing dog, picked up the scent. infallible evidence, you know. Picked up the scent. Now, just bear in mind, this dog that was used was the best that the British police had, and this is very, very poignant. And I want to come to this dog in a minute because there's a point of contention which does crop up. He used an anthropologist and an archaeologist. So they had an anthropologist who was there to sort of identify the remains. They found children's remains. The anthropologist then identified them as being infant remains, infant-aged children. There was collagen present. You know, only human beings and pigs have collagen. You know, that's why cadaver dog, they train them on pigs. You cannot tell the difference between a dog can't. Bear in mind their sensitivity, their nasal sensitivity is off the scale. Pigs and humans are very, very interlinked. You know, you can transpose any organ in a human body, a pig's body, into a human. You can't do it with an ape. You can do it with a pig, you know, and it sort of answers a bigger question: why don't a lot of religions eat pork? It's a very strange sort of thing. Anyway, identified it as human. The anthropologist corroborated that. The collagen was there. Identified the bones, the size of the bones to an age group. I think it was just under 10 years old, between 5 and 10, for example. You know, I no doubt the Satanists will then sort of pick holes in that and say, well, you know, and the archaeologist meticulously went through this. So it was corroborating the information received by the victims and survivors. They're heavily traumatised, damaged and frightened victims and survivors. The bones were sent off to the mainland, to the Forensic Services Laboratory for the Metropolitan Police. They were diverted en route to another laboratory. Every exhibit sealed up in a bag has a unique seal reference. This seal reference, for example, was ES 123456. It came back in a bag with seal reference 123456 ES, but a different bag. So it was like they, you know, duplicated this reference, and they turned around and said the opinion, you know, the evidence of like the examining officers was it was coconut shell. I mean, this is a level they'll go to. Their back was against the wall. They were FUCK, you know. Yeah. Lenny Harper is a man who stood his ground and has become a very staunch ally in our fight against this and exposing this. And he said to me, John, you must continue, but bear in mind you're up against the establishment. My
friend Mike went over there and looked around that site, and he said there was a statue of Pan.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Well, Bill Maloney says it, and it's Pan. It's called the Devil's Hole, walking on water. So it's a mockery of Jesus, you know. And this is why they do it, you know, so because Jesus loves the children and wants the children protected. So therefore it is in the interest of the Satanists to destroy the children. They destroy the children, they're nailing Jesus back to the cross. It's a mockery of Christianity, and it's you know.
And there's a thing with Satanism, from what I can gather, is inversion.
Everything.
So you would have like a children's home and social services, what on paper would care for children, but in reality they're kind of like picking children to...
Look, you know, the devil does things for many reasons. We can't just pin it down to one reason. So you get a lot of campaigning groups and all that saying social services stealing children. Well, let's get this right. There's social workers that believe in protection of children. Yeah. Kids go into care, like I said, 80% because they're not safe at home. Okay, now there's a bigger argument why they're not safe at home. Why is there alcoholism? Why is there drug addiction? And again, that can be linked probably back to child abuse, but also this deliberate attack on the family values system, you know. Children are needed. Like I said earlier, they are a cash cow from cradle to grave. They're used in the family courts. Money is made. The kids then progress because of dysfunctionality, anger and other issues which are falsely or wrongly identified in schooling. If they are identified by teachers who want to flag up, they're silenced, right? And you know, or they're sacked. We hear many accounts from social workers. I'm going to be doing an interview with one who stood up and faced the same adversity that I did. Okay. So this is what I was saying. In let's cover for the last and final time the trolling element. Anyone who thinks I do this to massage my ego, to make millions or whatever out of this, I'm telling you, you're talking out of your backside. If anyone can imagine the pain and grief every single one of us whistleblowers encounters. I nearly lost my home. I was nearly imprisoned on 9 occasions. right? My mental health suffered, my physical health suffered, all for what? For standing up. So if people can't look me in the eyes and see the reason I'm doing this and see the truth and the justice and the need for this to be exposed, then I'm telling you what, you're a wrong un, right? Or you have total and utter cognitive distortion, right? Because I am doing this because it is the right thing to do, and that will be the end of the trolling issue. These are very, very damaged and detrimental people. And I tell you what, we have all walked across broken glass and back again to get the truth out there. Not for me. I wasn't a victim and survivors. I'm doing this for those that didn't have the voice. I will be your voice. I will put your testimony out there. I will do what the police have failed to do. Okay, and nothing will stop me. No brain dead moronic troll will stop me. I will continue to do this in the name of justice and in the name of Jesus Christ. We will expose this. And that is it. And now, if we go back there, Jimmy, sorry, went over, Jimmy.
Mate, you can, this is the place. You can
now, there is something I think that you wanted to me to go on it. Let's talk about the Madeleine McCann case for a minute. Now, part of the reason that Lenny Harper was massively attacked was because he was on the right course to exposing, you know, in my opinion, the satanic abuse of children in Haute-de-la-Garenne, right? They attacked the dog, this cadaver dog. They attacked this dog, and they tried to discredit the dog and its handler to such a degree that they then started looking at the timeline of this dog's investigation. So as a result of Haute-de-Garenne, the McCann family, Jerry and Kate McCann, did their utmost to absolutely ruin the testimony of the dog handler and the dog to such a degree that caused, to a certain point, the failure of Haute-de-Garenne.
Yeah.
So these are very, very well connected and twisted individuals, you know. Mike Veal, like I said earlier, the chief constable, you know, who openly stated that Ted Heath was involved in Satanism, and he was 120% certain that the man is a child abuser and would have gone to prison. He was attacked and to such a degree that they ruined this decent and brave individual's career through a whole manner of vexatious misreporting in the national media and trolling. So this again is how the trolling links in with the media misreporting to bring about the demise. It is very organised, you know. And I said to Mike, who are your attackers? And he said, it comes from the intelligence services and it comes from the House of Lords. And Mike Veal, what a good guy. And again, it all starts to dovetail in. We will see whistleblowers being rubbished and denigrated consistently. Me more than anyone else. You've got to carry on. Like you said earlier, when you're over the target, the flak is going to come. And it really is going to come. But we must endeavour and we must show fortitude and keep going, because we are gaining ground at such a phenomenal rate. You know, if I can go on the street and I can use nothing but my mobile telephone, you know, and my interview skills to bring about testimonies that are so powerful that you know, we have a following now which has gone into the millions, you know. Like I said earlier, some of our videos have had 2.2 million and rising. I can go on the street and people will pat me on the back and say, carry on. Not one of them will say anything that's subject to any troll nonsense, you know, and all that. So there is a need for them to silence us at any given point. And all this does all intertwine, you see. So when you see like the McCann case, £11.5 million, not questioned, and the Home Office continuing to throw money into this absolute nonsensical, you know, investigation, you know. And you see the Chief Officer Concalves in Portugal, not only did he write one book, which they tried to silence him and sue him for, he won and went on to write another book. Is that the testimony of a liar, you know? What the hell are the British police, who have no jurisdiction outside of the Commonwealth, doing in a Napoleonic law country like Portugal? Absolutely no jurisdiction, yet they were in there working with impunity, digging up their soil. It's just ridiculous, the lengths that they went to. They attacked Mike Veal for overspending, right? £1.5 million is what Mike Veal, he cut as much cloth as he could to get this cheap, yet he was deemed by all the media, you know, more so the Daily Mail than anyone else, that this man is deliberately defrauding the public. And again, they always bring in this money issue and all that. You know, you see the same patterns occurring. So they, you know, they did it with Mike Veal, and of course he was doing the public the biggest service that has ever been done by any chief constable. So we start looking at, La Haute de la Garenne, and that there was alluded to that this may be a ritualistic type of abuse. And then what happened then was people started coming and speaking to me, and there was a pattern that emerged. These were people that never knew each other. They were geographically separated, but they all said the same things. And it would be sexual abuse by the parents, so there would be this grooming by the parents. So they were raped by the mother and by the father at a very, very infant age. There was this process of drowning, so they would be drowned in blood. They would be made to eat feces. They would then be passed on and raped by other people. They would then be taken to rituals, and these were all manner of places. They were mortuaries, these were abattoirs, these were abortion clinics and forest, rural settings. There would be deity worship, and I said, well, what deities? They say Lucifer, Satan, Moloch. So you see the same things coming again. There would be animals would be used. Animals would be sacrificed, and then babies would be sacrificed. And then the child would be used to then sacrifice the baby. The child would then be raped. They would drink the blood of the newly sacrificed baby. Body parts would be eaten. They would eat the body parts. They would be placed, the children would be taken to wooded areas. They would be stripped, and they would be then, it's called the hunt, and they would then be chased through the woods, would ultimately be caught. And when they were caught, they were raped and sodomized. And you see the same thing happen again and again and again and again, and it keeps coming out. Now, it sounds incredulous, you think, what, really? Mm-hmm. But it isn't.
Yeah.
It's so well covered up. And there was a case that came out a few years ago of 2 children in the Hampstead area. It's called the Hampstead Case. And again, there was this group that was set up to attack it called Hoaxed. And they have a massive problem with me for speaking out. And they were deliberately out to denigrate these children. These children give what's called a free-flowing narrative. I specialised in interviewing children. These children, in my professional opinion, were not lying.
Yeah.
Especially the girl, she gives this unbelievable free-flowing narrative, and she alludes and evidences everything I've just said. And it's strange because there was a police officer that was posted in the Hampstead, the Camden area, the borough of Camden, and his job was to police the protests, because there was a massive public outrage and there was protest stations outside. One of the places was a church. Churches crop up a lot, military bases, all sorts of places. And he said, when these people would turn up and would protest, he said, we can't believe that people are eating babies. What a load of nonsense, this is rubbish. And these strange weirdos would come up and protest. He said, what a load of nutters. And he contacted me about a month ago, and he said, John, I've been watching your stuff. And he said, everyone's saying what them 2 little kids said. He said, I don't think they were lying, John. I said, well, they weren't lying. No. So slowly, we are doing our job. We are gaining the ground. I spoke to a guy, a lot of people that have come from the criminal community, the prison system, hard people, hard men that would never go near a copper, and they'll come in and they're talking to me, They are coming and talking. One is a very, very brave man called Darren. Darren's testimony is online. I interviewed him. He's been interviewed by Sean Atwood. They need to make a film about this poor man, what he suffered. He was abused sexually by a school teacher. He went to speak out and was then taken to court. They took him to court for absconding from school, right? They classed him as a liar. He was placed in a care home where he was abused. So he was raped at school, then he was abused. He was abused by one of the judges in his case. He was placed in a care home down in Bath, near Bristol, where he was just subject to nightly rapes. And one of the things he said would happen was that he was made to eat feces and drink urine, as were the other boys. They were taken to a wooded area, and these Hunger Games would take part, where he was chased through the woods and he was whipped, beaten and then sodomized. And again, he never experienced a ritual, but that is a satanic ritual that took part. he went on to become a very, very damaged individual, a very angry man, and he ended up with a 36-year prison sentence because he was one of the UK's most prolific armed robbers. And that's all because of what they've done to him. So when we look at the fiscal side, at the financial side of this, if they address child abuse properly and they dealt with it in the manner they should, they would save so much money and society would be healed. It is deliberately broken. Now you have to ask yourself, why? Why? Now, if I can get this information, then sure as hell, we can say that term, aren't the police getting it? Well, the answer is the police do get this information, and they do. You know, why are politicians not doing anything? And again, there are politicians that have, you know, and they are then silenced, bullied, threatened, and then denigrated. We see this denigration, this process of denigration all the time. Social workers have spoken out, the same thing happens. And then there are deaths as well.
Yeah.
I mean, there's question marks over Jill Dando's death. There's question marks over Lady Diana's death. And we are hearing the same things. And there have been police operation after operation where celebrities have been named. And then we have the range list that comes in. Now, years ago, back in the 70s, there was a group called the Campaign for Civil Liberties, which has now morphed into this civil rights group, political group called Liberty. But at their inception, there was 3 female MPs, Margaret Hodge, Patricia Hewitt and Harriet Harman, all of them right honourables. And let me tell you now, there's nothing righteous or honourable about these individuals. One of them went on to become Minister for Children and Safeguarding. They should be in prison, in my opinion.
Okay.
They have deliberately failed and protected paedophiles, in my opinion, and I will evidence this. The Campaign for Civil Liberties was patronising a group called PIE, P-I-E, Paedophile Information Exchange, which was a pro-paedophile group. This group wanted the age of consent between a man and a boy to be lowered to 8 years old, right? And they were getting political assent by these Labour MPs who are now right honourables, you know, members of the cabinet now, you know. Privy councillors, may I add, each one a privy councillor. And again, they're still in office now.
Yeah.
You know, they are still in office now. And I think Harriet Harman herself wanted the age of consent between a man and a girl lowered to 14. Now, anyone who has a child will be, you know, should be appalled at this. Now, PIE were even allowed at the London School of Economics to give a speech at the Campaign for Civil Liberties Christmas event. They even gave them the stage. This is the most abhorrent thing that we have seen in the public eye, in the political domain, you know. And then we look at each politician has a political advisor, a PA. We look at so many of the past 5 prime ministers, their PAs have even been convicted or have involvement or been under investigation for paedophilia, you know. So Peter Wright, and we can go through the whole list. There was a bloke called Rock, who was the one for Tony Blair, you know, convicted of paedophilia, right? And this is why politicians will do nothing, because it is ingrained at the very nucleus of our political establishment. And this is going to bring us, this is now going to dovetail in to the ancient history of Satanism and why it exists. We look at Elm Guest House.
You know what, this is just weird. I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, the Elm Guest House. Now, I know the guy who disclosed the list, and he again was attacked monumentally by a certain one of our trolls as well. And this guy, it was because of him it became public domain. Very, very brave man. And there were politicians and there were people in public eye that were in there, and they were raping children, you know, and they were making porn films. And, you know, shame on the British establishment and the British police force for denying the existence of snuff movies. They are real and they exist. And do you know why they exist? Because they have monumental blackmail worth. This will come down to blackmail, and it will also ultimately come down to the worship of these negative deities. It all links in. Now, when anyone ever speaks out about this, Jimmy, and it starts going to, you know, a public forum, especially a media agency that dares go near this and has the fortitude and the balls and the moral backbone to actually disclose this vile fetid rot in our society that is Satanism and child abuse, they are served with a thing called a D notice. A D notice is a defence notice. It was brought in during the First World War by the naval intelligence, and remember there's an old adage that loose lips sink ships.
Oh, right, yeah.
Comes from there, right? So there is a need to protect, you know, the UK for some sort of, you know, foreign or political influence. So what the hell are the military intelligence services, the MI departments doing? Because MI stands for military intelligence. We have 5 and 6 now. There are others below that, but 5 is homeland and 6 is overseas. What the hell are military doing imposing civil restrictions on media agencies if it's not in some way going to hinder the political or economic stability of a country? And that is a reason why the MI departments intervene, where they take over from the civil police, because there is a need to protect the civil, you know, the economic, financial and the political stability of a country. So if we chuck into the mix then that if there is a politician such as Ted Heath, Leon Britton and many others that are posthumously identified, there's many more that are living that are known about and it's never pursued, that if they are involved in Satanism or if they are involved in the raping and the sodomizing of children, then surely they are going to be a problem. And that, you know, and especially it makes me think more about espionage. So these spies, really, were they selling military secrets, or were they actually going to foreign agencies and saying there is a lot of paedophilia in the British government?
Yeah.
You know, and I think Putin has alluded to that publicly, saying the UK is a paedophile country.
Right.
And how weakening must that be? And if we look at the recent disclosure by the IICSA, the Independent Inquiry of Child Sexual Abuse, an ongoing independent inquiry into the cover-ups, we see, and it was proved that they looked at the audit trail of funding for PI, Paedophile Information Exchange, this group that wanted to legalise, you know, the rape of a grown man to a young child. They found that for 5 years running, they were being paid for by the Metropolitan Police's Special Branch. And their answer to that was, well, if we monitored them, if we funded them, we can monitor them. Okay. To a degree, I accept that rationale, but what did you do with that information? How did you stop the abuse? You are the police. You are there to protect society. You are there to act without fear or without favour and protect society. Oh, it's vulnerable. They've done the opposite, in my opinion. Right. So this is what we're seeing time and time again, and we are seeing this mighty sledgehammer come in that is cracking any nut that dares stick its head out. And may I say something to whistleblowers, anyone wants to whistleblow, you will stand alone, a victim and a survivor. When you stand up, you'll stand alone. No one will stand with you. What you do is the bravest thing that you can ever do. And I say to people, you must back them up. You must find the balls, the backbone to back them up. And I equate it to this, Jimmy. You know, anyone who's ever done parachuting, if you jump out of a plane, you get a thing called ground rush 2 meters before. You get this quick boom to the ground, pull to the ground. If you land on one leg, you're going to break that leg, right? You land with your legs apart, you can still damage your legs, right? And it's the same as a whistleblower. You go down on your own, you're going to be broken. They will crush you unless you really have got the strength to carry on. A survivor, if you've got that information that's going to cause damage, they will crush you, as we've seen with Carl Beach and many others. But if you stand together, not apart, not like that, but together, 2 legs put together have the strength of 3 legs. And that's why parachutists' legs are tight like that, because that will support your legs 3 times, threefold. So if you then stand against and with, another whistleblower and corroborate it, you're going to win. And this is what we call out to whistleblowers, to victims and survivors. You must stand together. Whatever you do not let them separate. And there is a concerted attempt, and they do it via trolls.
Yes.
And they do it via damaged people, to separate people, because too many survivor groups break up. Because they will feed that seed of insecurity to an already troubled individual, a vulnerable individual with monumental trust issues anyway, and they do it on purpose. So that's why trolling is a very sinister thing, and they know what they're doing, and they do know what they're doing. And the establishment will play on that as well, because it will be an inner. I've worked on covert operations. I recruited informants. I would recruit from the street, and I would, and it's exactly the same as the intelligence services. We'll be recruiting from survivor groups everywhere else to get in to bring it down. I know how they work, you know, because I've worked on intelligence and I've worked on it, so I know these traits. So when they say, oh, so-and-so works for government, it's absolute bullshit. There's a fundamental lack of understanding of how covert operations work. So we started getting survivors coming forward saying exactly the same thing. And a couple of people, three people now said to me, John, you'll find that behind this will be the military machine.
Yeah.
And this is where you get what's called MK Ultra, right?
Okay.
Now, I used to think this is all that, you know, I'm a super soldier and all that, and I dismissed it to start with, and I did, until I started meeting people that had been involved in mind control. So this is where it differs from standard child abuse. They fracture the mind. The child mind cannot cope, so it gets shattered into these little fragments, and then they all have their own little altar. And then memories will then be suppressed, because if the memories come forward, the pain is too immense. It triggers them. The mind is a strange thing, because if all your memories were kept in one sort of cerebral location, if you've got a knock on that location, you ain't got any memory. Now, you need memory. You need memory, conscious and unconscious. So your conscious memory will be your learning, what you've learnt through life. Your unconscious will be how you eat, how you walk, how you talk, how even your organs all work. You know, so memory will be spread across the whole sort of surface, you know, of the cerebral area. So if one area gets caught, it's not a major problem. You might lose a bit of understanding then, but it's still there. So this memory, this damaged memory, will be pigeonholed away, but it gets pigeonholed in infinite detail, right? So it's there, and as the person goes through life, the memories will start coming out, and they will be triggered by certain things. And also, someone will make life choices. They don't know why they're making them, because it's their memories that are directing them, and usually it's a negative life choice. The partner they choose, the areas they live, so they will tend to subconsciously be drawn back into this damaging area, you know. And it's managing to understand how this works. And when you're dealing with people with DID, sometimes they will not only change the personality, you can actually physically see them change. Yeah. And I have seen it. And someone said, well, that's bullshit, how does that work? Well, let me tell you now, Jimmy, how you look before you're spruced up to go out for a night out is different to how you look the next morning after 2 hours kip and a gut load of beer. Totally different. You'll look like a different person.
Of course.
And you'll get the same thing, you know. You know, so if you've had a good night's sleep, you've been away, you've refreshed, you've got a bit, you know, but if you're worn out, bags under your eyes, how I look all the time now. You know.
Lovely, John.
Oh, hey.
I'll marry you. Anyway.
But, you know, and so it does, and then you will see these different personalities will click in, and they do it for a plethora of reasons, you know. So it could be that the child is going to be used for a certain task, and this is where the military stuff starts getting involved. And when you start talking to people, certain locations will be used. So the forest will be used for the sort of deity worship, but you hear a lot about military bases being used. Now I thought, how can that be? But they will have their own people. So the military bases, what I've been told, will be used because they can use certain equipment for electrocution and things like that, which you wouldn't have access to. You couldn't have it anywhere else. No. So, you know, and hospitals always crop up as well. And then, of course, the child will also be used for sex parties. So, you know, the Satanists will want groomed children because they will be sexually experienced. They will know what to do. They won't flinch and they won't run away. The defiling of them is the opposite, the inversion of Christianity. So when you go to church, you get the Holy Ghost, the toast, the body of Christ and that stuff, you know. But they will do the same, but it will be made from feces mixed in with menstrual blood and semen and urine, and it will be mixed in and that will be given to them. So a lot of the children will suffer a lot of colonic problems, a lot of intestinal problems because it's bacteria and it's causing a lot of grief in your body. You know, if you eat with dirty hands, you're going to get the shit. So they will have a history of this as well. There's people have come to me where they can't keep down a job because they defecate themselves, because the anus has been so badly damaged through infancy, you know, and lapse, and women that have got spinal problems, you know, they've got misaligned wombs, they cannot, you know, these are reality. And a doctor said to me, you know, a vagina is a wall of muscle, and it's designed to go back, to be reused, to go back to, you know, of course, over a period of time, our muscles do lapse because that's the aging process. But an anus is a sphincter muscle. It's a circular muscle made up of a chain of muscles looped round. And when you rupture the anus, which will happen, you know, with anal sex and everything else, it may look like it's gone back, whereas a vagina will contract like that, but the sphincter muscles will break, and they will break, causing damage to there, you know. So there's all these problems as well that go on that we never really hear about, but there's a reality of it. And the children will be used for the sex parties, and then of course the older they get, they will then be coerced into it to recruit others into it, and have children. Women are used for breeding purposes, and they will produce babies. You know, there's one woman, she's got a child, one son, but she's had 5 children. Yeah. There's other women that have no children, but gynecologically, when they've been tested, that they can clearly see, you know, when they have the gynae exams, that there has been birth. You know, one woman has got stab wounds in her vagina where they would insert needles into her. It comes back in a memory, and she's been checked out, and it's corroborated. You know, and these memories start coming back to them, and this then causes a lot of trauma and a lot of anger and a lot of upset, and then that could cause suicide and everything else, you see. And some start getting their memories with absolute clarity, and that's going to be a problem, because then they'll start to speak out. Until that point, you're going to get a very dyspraxic and sometimes crazy account, which doesn't make sense. And the other thing is, they need lucidity, but they don't need memory recall. So they will be given drugs. So children that have been used in pornography will be heavily sedated and will have no, you know, recall. You know, one woman said it was only years later she saw porno films with her in it, and she don't remember because she was sedated. But she said the Satanic Rituals were different because they needed me awake, but they will give them hallucinogens, and therefore her memory recall will be with rabbits jumping about, things like that, because, you know, she needed to be awake but then unaware. So if she gave a testimony to the police, it'd be like, she's clearly crackers. Yeah. But then there are others, and I implore anyone to listen to probably the account of total clarity of that of a woman called Jeanette Archer. And Jeanette Archer, you know, it works with us very, very good, closely, and she liaises with other victims and survivors of abuse. And she's an excellent woman for a survivor to get in touch with, because she's been there and she lived through it, and she's a woman of total compassion. And her account is horrifically clear. Now, it has been reported to the police. The police believed her, yet it was shut down. And she goes on about a farm in which she was taken to a farm, and there were children were killed and murdered. She was raped there. And there has been corroboration by the police, but then they've discontinued. And we see the same accounts time and time again. Someone else has come forward now to give a very similar account of the same address. Jeanette goes on about, second time I've heard it now, about a police accommodation in London. I've heard accounts of one in South East London, and now one in South West London, where she would be taken to and pimped out. Also of porno films would be made, and there would be police officers half in uniform would be there watching, and then she'll be passed to them. And again, I've heard corroborated accounts of this. And one of the addresses was reported to the Independent Inquiry as well, because a lot of people have mentioned it. So there is a need for the police, but it's blackmail value. Yeah. And the one thing I've been told about Satanic Rituals are, you don't go there as a spectator. You turn up, you will participate, therefore they've got you. It will be filmed, and snuff films are made and they are traded. And the Dutch police have given proper accounts of this, you know, they've admitted it. If we look at something in recent memory, we got the case in Belgium of a man called Marc Dutroux, Dutroux. Please watch the video, The Beast of Belgium. Marc Dutroux did not work alone. He was a procurer, what we term as a fixer. He would get the children, and we're going to go in about the hierarchy in a minute of how this works. And he went to prison. He went down for the abduction, the rape, and I think the murder of two girls that he was abducting off the streets of Belgium. And then he was keeping them in a sort of a dungeon, again a dungeon in his own house, and he was then using these children for sex parties. Mark Dutroux went away for the abuse that he did, and he did alone. However, the evidence clearly states that Mark Dutroux was passing the girls on, and there was mentions of members of the royal family of Belgium, high up in banking in Belgium, and there was every attempt to subdue it. The magistrate in the case that allowed the search warrant was arrested. The police officer was removed. There was death threats against the only journalists that actually bothered to report on it. And so they did everything they could to keep a lid on it. Now, Belgium is a small country in populace, it's a rural country. It's a very much a divided country with the Flemish north and the French-speaking south. And again, we'll see this a lot, how language is a huge barrier and the police forces don't talk to each other. Okay. And so appalled were the public, and I think it was to do with, there was a link between one of the girls and the Belgian fireman, that they tried to subdue it, and the fireman, God bless them for this, God bless the firemen for this, and there's a lot of groups that bring about change, and the fire service, we've seen it in France, are bringing about change, especially with the yellow vests, they're standing by the supporters against the police. So power to the fire service, and I call out to the fire service, please stand with us, because you have a history of doing the right thing. God bless the fire service. The police have an appalling history of doing the opposite. Again, it's not an attack on the body on the beat, it's not. I'm attacking chief constables here. And they went and they blasted the windows of the parliamentary building in Brussels, saying it needs to be cleansed. And they blew the windows, and then the farmers sprayed shite over it. Right? And then the official stats are 500,000 people, but the word on the street was 1 million Belgians took to the streets of Brussels and protested and brought Brussels to a standstill. And then for it made, Google it, it made the White Flowers group come out of it. It made national and international media attention. Now, when we have protests in London, I've been there where there's been 5 of us. We have this lackluster, but someone throws a cat in a bin, and all of a sudden they've got to be killed and hung, drawn and quartered. We really do miss the point in this country, and there'll be many reasons why that occurs, and it's because we have just been so heavily infiltrated and subdued in this country. We have been brought to our knees, basically. We need to wake up, because in the words of that song by the Manic Street Preachers, albeit about the Spanish Civil War, if we tolerate this, then our children will be next. And I'm telling the public, our children will be next. They are coming and they are destroying our society, and your children are going to suffer unless you do something now. And that is why we continue to do what we're doing. Now, a lady approached me. She was come from an intergenerational satanic abusing family. She's a woman of total clarity, intelligence and compassion, and she was used in her early years for these rituals. She has got total memory recall, and I've been in contact with her quite a bit, and she said, John, get pen and paper. I am now going to show you exactly how the satanic hierarchy works and why it works. So I did, I jotted this down, and I'm going to now sort of relay this now graphically for you for how this works.
Do you need me to be on board duty, John?
Yeah, if you hold that up. And I'm going to...
Colin, are we looking...
Right.
Just tilt it down a bit.
Now, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just write it out and then I'll pass it to you. Show it now, at the bottom...
Can we hold it for you or anything?
Just like that, I'll do. Right, at the bottom of this pyramid of shite... If we can hold that there, or what we call term the spotters. Now the spotters, they go out. They are regional, right? They are throughout the UK. They will go out in any community, and they will try and highlight and spot a dysfunctional family and a child which is at risk of exploitation, right? Now the the lower and the working classes, we have got a history of this. We never used to have, but we have now this history of dysfunctionality, of single parenting. I was a single parent. Let me tell you now, it ain't right. And I'm not attacking single parents, and I'm not, because I was one. It's hard work, and it makes you so weak. You are that single leg on the parachutist. You are. Anything goes wrong, them kids are gone from you. And if you haven't got the family support network, my word, your kids are going into care, and that ain't a place for them to be. I'm telling you now. They will go out and they will try and find these kids. They will be scouting around. That is their job, to find the weakness in our family, right? And once they do this, that intelligence is then passed over. And we go on to the next group. Put that down here. The next group, and these are...
Can I just tell you a little story? And I've heard this third hand, I don't know the...
yeah.
Okay, it's not come from me, but
Yeah.
basically there was a girl in Wigan, and one of her relations was a paedophile, and the social services stepped in, and they took her kids off her, although they'd not been in contact with this uncle or whatever it was, and they said, you're never going to see these children again, but you can have other children if you want.
It's just incredible. How do we allow that? How do we even allow that? You know, once I've done this, I want to go on about the fostering and the adoption, and because this has become a multi-million pound business. In my opinion, social workers should never be allowed to foster kids, and I might upset a few people there because it's a conflict of interest and it's open to perversion, and because you get the wrong ones in there, and there are now a lot of foster ex-social workers going on and setting up these foster adoption agencies, and it's become a multi-million pound concern. They are deliberately going out there to find fault in a family. I've had stories of where they are deliberately going in there and say that the mother stinks of alcohol.
Yeah.
You know, that this and that, you know, and I'm hearing it all the time. The kids are taken into care. The family court system is not fit for purpose. It's an appallingly closed, secretive court under the Children's Act. And then the kids are then farmed out to other families. And sometimes they're farmed out to families that are outside of their belief system, their racism. I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing, but then there has been this... like this mafia that has built up around it, and there's huge money to be earned from it.
Like a
cartel in it, and then that group will then come in positions of management, and it will be a self-feeding monster that will prey on the weak and the vulnerable. And it is wrong. I saw it in the police, where if someone was arrested and they would be basically conned into not having a solicitor and put your hands up, we'll look after you. And of course they never looked after them, they just got thrown to the wall. So you see it all the time. You know, you must always be represented, always be legally represented, you know, and tell as many people as you can, because the one thing they don't want is exposure. They don't want exposure.
Yeah.
Which sort of leads us into the next group. It leads us into this group called the lookers. Now, the lookers, the spotters pass the information to the lookers. The lookers will then start profiling this family. They will have people in the social services department, like we've just mentioned, maybe in the policing system, maybe in GPs and all that, and they will start putting a case together about getting hold of these kids and taking them, whether it's into the care system or into fostering or whatever, and then totally taken away from the security of a family background. They're out there, they're active, and they're doing their job. They're paid to do their job. You know, they are linked to Satanism, and they will wholeheartedly do their job. So once the lookers get this intelligence package and it's all brought together, it then gets moved to the next lot. And the next lot are a group which are brought into three tiers. 1, 2, 3. Right, now they're called the fixers. So if we look at this then, Jimmy, I think if you want to talk down, the fixers, right? So you've got the low level fixers, then you've got the middle level, and then you've got the upper level. And this will relate to what sort of swathe of society they're dealing with, you know, and who the customers are from the lower level right the way up. So one person who was a high level fixer, if we take that, well, actually take that as a high level, is a bloke called Jimmy Savile. Again, doesn't that then link in Jim will fix it?
I was thinking, we spoke about that earlier. It's kind of like a sick joke.
It is a sick joke. These are procurers of children. They will be issued with a due date, right, by those higher up. A child is needed, and a child is needed by this date. you will get that child. So they will make sure that this guy has got it all in place and this guy has done his job. And heaven help them if they don't, right? That is their job. And they prefer a groomed child, a child that has come from abuse. However, they don't have to. They will then also be opportunistic and will go out there and snatch a child. And runaway kids come into this category, and they will be given specifics. So it might be they want a ginger-haired boy, they might want a black girl, they might want an Asian, depending on the perversion or whatever it's needed. And unfortunately, what we hear from testimonies are those snatched children die. That's it, they die.
Yeah.
And they're finished. So we've seen a lot of child murders in this country, and we've seen a lot of people that have gone away for their murders. It puts a question mark. Were these people that murdered them, were they just the lookers and not the abusers?
Yeah.
And I'm more thinking of people like Ian Huntley and Roy Whiting, you know, these people.
Was Huntley implicated, do you think?
I don't know, but I no doubt. I mean, I'm looking at his testimony about the two girls and that one slipped and died and all this. I don't believe in it for a minute. He was then interned in Rampton Prison, a mental institution, you know, and so... And again, it makes me then think about segregation. You know, when sex offenders are placed on the Rule 43 and they're segregated, okay, we get that because it's for their safety, which we're not really bothered about, but also the safety of the officers who are put to protect them. But also, it will stop them sharing information. So if they were general populace, maybe they would share the information and they would start speaking out. Look, you know, I'm not working alone. Yes, I got the child, but this is why, and I think there may be that element to it. You know, now these kids that they take, they're given a name. Now we heard from many testimonies from the street, from like the meat rack and things like that, that the kids are called chickens, and you know they're even called a fresh chicken or a cooked chicken, but this lot are called something else. They're called diamonds.
No.
Right, diamonds. Now, we see diamonds alluded to a lot in music videos and everything
We
else.
was talking about that Rihanna, Shine Like a Diamond.
Shine Like a Diamond, you know, and Lou was on about someone else with the kids are pictured with diamonds on there, very, very dark sort of artwork and all that. They're termed diamonds, and the call will go back that we found a diamond, or we need a blonde diamond, we need a dark diamond, we need what? And diamonds are the words that they say. So we got the high level fixers and say that Jimmy Savile was known as being a high level fixer, you know, and everyone thinks that, and it's come out that he was very satanically involved and linked in with hospitals. So he was there at every level. And of course he fooled a nation, but did he fool a nation? He didn't fool victims and survivors. They knew damn well. He was reported on numerous occasions to the police. And also we see that with Surrey Police, how Surrey Police have monumentally failed. We saw how Surrey Police have failed in respect to Jeanette Archer, and then when you get the inquiries coming back, Surrey Police has the county has a disproportionate amount of satanic abuse. We're in the process of putting in freedom of information requests to all policing districts. How many reports of SRA have you had? And the figures we're getting back are absolutely incredulous. I mean, I think there's been 15 convictions in the British courts. They don't differentiate between the indictments. So rape will not be linked to ritualistic abuse, whereas in other countries they will put a ritual. So if we take an assault, for instance, and you punch someone, it's an ABH. But if you punch someone and call them an F in this or an F in that, then there could be a homophobic element attached to it or a racial element attached to it. We need the law change where there's a satanic element attached to this. We need that.
But that's not taken into account.
It's not taken into account, but there have been convictions where it has been mentioned.
Yeah.
All right, so there's been about 15 convictions, but then what we're doing is getting allegations that have gone in, and it's incredulous because some forces have refused to respond. The 40 sent back, I think 6 have said none, 11 have said yes so far, and others are refusing to comment. Surrey was the highest with I think 32. Now Northern Ireland, so the PSNI, the Police Service Northern Ireland, they're at 50. And there's a couple Norfolk that 1 or 2, but we are seeing that there is a lot more coming out now as a result of the work that we're doing.
Is it mostly down south or is it up north as well?
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Across the board.
Endemic.
Right, so we got the fixes now. The procurers of children, very, very dangerous individuals. And as we're seeing, some of these are working with almost royal assent, you know.
Is
And
Leeds? Is Leeds a bad city for it?
I think all across the place.
You can't really
one place that always crops up is Rochdale.
Right.
Rochdale is just constantly mentioned. Rochdale. Now we move on to this next group. So, no! I've jumped one. I shouldn't jump the gun there. We move to this next one. This is when we sort of go into management now.
Okay.
And this is very interesting. This group, very, very, and I'm gonna underline this group. These are called the cleaners. The cleaners are brought in now. What was said to me was that the children are needed for sex orgies because these are perverted people that enjoy sex with children. They prefer sodomy to anything else. That's with girls and with boys. There are a lot of reasons for that, and there's a lot of religious reasons for that. We can call it religious because it's an attack on the chakra system. It's an energy draining system.
Right.
You know, and it's always been ritualistically used. You know. Now what happens is the cleaners are now brought in. These kids are used for orgies, but also they will be used for rituals, and they will be killed. Now, babies will be procured by either the breeding system, where sex slaves are kept, or they use homeless people and they pay them, they get them pregnant, they take their children. Some are sort of interned in sort of makeshift custody areas, or you know, whatever. Children are raped by their own family and procured kids, so there's a lot of illegal abortions and things like that. So fetuses are used, but also children are used in rituals. They have an incredible amount of worth because of the blood. They want the blood of the child. Now, after a ritual has taken place, there's physically a need to clean up, so that needs to be forensically sterile. So you need someone with some sort of degree of understanding, you know, of how to make this a sterile scene. But also forensics can also be distorted and misplaced. And I got this from a former flying squad officer who said to me, when they bring in DNA, be very careful. And I went, why? He said, because you can't put someone's fingerprint on the scene, but you can put someone's DNA on the scene. So we're sitting there having a smoke, Jimmy. I've chucked my fag out. You've got my DNA. That can be placed on the scene. You can eat an apple, chuck it in. You've got my DNA. Yeah. That can be placed on the scene.
A strand of hair falls at your head.
Anything, you know, so that it can be placed. So I think we saw that with the Jill Dando murder, where, you know, this Barry Bulsara, you know, Barry George, clearly a man of low intelligence, you know, was absolutely sort of hung out to dry. And I think if anyone believes the official narrative, or I think it's been proved now that it was a load of bullshit, you know, they need their head read, you know, basically. Yeah. So cleaners will be brought in. They will also make sure that police aren't called. So if we take, for example, that we're out to hold a ritual in, I don't know, one of the places been mentioned, Salvation Army places. And again, this is not, I'm not knocking any institution or anything like that. I'm just relaying what's been said, or any building. Then we got to look at, there's going to be parking issues. You know, these are contingencies that need looking at. So we've got to make sure that cars aren't blocking driveways, and therefore the police are called. We've got to make sure alarm systems are not triggered in the night. Right. You know what I mean? That lights aren't on where passers-by walking their dogs can look in and go, what the hell's going on in there, you know? So all of this is what the cleaners will be paid to do. And they will be regional. I was told that there are 5 regions in the UK. There will be police officers in there, and one in particular was mentioned to me who I am aware of, and I'll leave it at that for the time being. And these are very highly paid. They will do their job very accurately, you know, and they will keep all the others in line, you know. And also there'll be huge blackmail value as well for these others, you know. And so those that are the recipients of the children, are using the children and all that, will be blackmailed. They will be. I was told one of them, a looker, was saying that she was used at the guest house, and her job was to watch that no one was paying any interest in when a child was brought in for an important client, you know. And she then goes on to tell me about some of the important clients, and it has involved singers, and it has involved politicians. And again, we are seeing this time and time again, and we are seeing D notices being served on people speaking out. So that therefore alludes to the fact that I think, in my opinion, that the Special Branch and the intelligence services knew, and especially if we look at Ted Heath, you know, this guy called James Reeves gives his account where he said Ted Heath would drive and would pick boys up from Hampstead Heath, you know, for anal sex, young boys, runaway boys, and they tried to rubbish James, called him a liar. Again, we see this, the need to denigrate, we see this all the time. And he stood his ground and said he drove, and they said, how could Ted Heath drive? He never had a driving licence. And then it turned round at the inquiry that Ted Heath had a Rover car and he was driving without a licence.
Right.
And his protection officers would step back, right? And the intelligence was being fed in. So I call out to these intelligence officers, why are you stepping back? You know, because you step back, these kids are getting hurt, and you know. So you might sit there with your pensions from the police, from the military, and think it weren't my job. Well, I'm telling you, you're part of the machine that, you know, machinations that's allowing this to continue. You need to look inside yourself, and you need to get a little bit of spiritual fortitude and realise, man, it ain't good. This ain't good to go to the grave knowing this. It ain't. It's no good to anyone.
It'll go with you wherever, won't it?
Yeah, you know. So these cleaners will be in the police, they will be doctors, they will be GPs, they will be called in coroners to falsify reports and to clean up and make sure there's total sterility.
To cover the tracks.
They're not really loyal to these, they govern these, they're loyal to the ones above them.
Yeah.
Right, and let's move on to the ones above, and then we've got... Here we go. The international fixers, these will be these par excellence. They will be the ones that will be procuring children, as it says, on an international level. They will facilitate, you know, the conveyance of these kids to foreign countries. I've been told that some were taken on Hercules planes, they were drugged, taken transatlantic and everywhere else. And I said, well, how can that be the case? How can you use a military jet? Said, because they will use their own pilots, and a lot of these will be pilots themselves. They will also have their own boats. Yeah. And again, one of the people that was mentioned was Jeffrey Epstein, was an international fixer.
Okay.
Jeffrey Epstein. So we are seeing it coming out, and if we look prior to lockdown, this COVID nonsensical pandemic, you know,
which is in itself a satanic ritual,
without a doubt, horrendous. Before that, there was an awakening, you know, before they really subdued us. You know, Prince Andrew was implicated as being involved, you know, in paedophilia, and there was protests outside Parliament implicating him, and all of a sudden, bang, it's gone. That's forgotten about, you know, and this will be alluded to shortly, you know. So everything that's being told to me ties in with various accounts, and also ties in with the account of Jeanette Archer, brave people like Jeanette that have got the balls to stand up and speak out. And people like Jeanette Archer are saving lives. They are going to go on to save a generation. I'm 100% certain of that. There will be an awakening, and I'm calling out, you've got to get on board with this, and you've got to really, you don't have to believe me, right? But I'm telling you what, there's a lot that do believe me, and I hold a lot of sway here, and I will never ever deny the truth, because the truth will come out. The truth is coming out, and it needs people like myself, Jeanette, you know, Jenny, all these other brave, and Jenny, Jenny Grace's testimony will break your heart. She goes on about the whole sort of system as this, you know. You need to listen, because we're doing this not for us, we suffer. We're doing this so our children don't suffer, and we need to keep that in perspective. Yeah. This is big boys games, this is very serious stuff, you know, going on. And that's why we can't waste our time with the low level nitpicking down there. We can't even go there with it.
It's engineered, isn't it?
Oh, of course it is, and it's just scummy. So that the international fixers will procure them for this next group, and they call themselves the Bloods, right? Right, the Bloods. Now the Bloods are very, very powerful business magnates, families, intergenerational families. And they're almost at the very top. There is a group above them, and these are the ones that want these children, and they want the children because they cannot survive without the blood of the child. They need it. And again, this goes on to this adrenochrome that is coming out.
Is it kind of a really highly prized commodity?
They need it. What I was told, they need it. If they don't get it, they really suffer. They physically suffer. They mentally suffer. They age. They get sunken. It's like not having heroin.
It's common sense, really, because the blood of young children, I think it contains more copper peptides, and that creates more stem cells.
Prepubescent, and if you look at a child again, their life, their purity. So there is a need for the Satanists to destroy that, you know, and everything is for their own ends. They just value what is artificial.
Yeah.
You know, I will be like the Most High. You know, the Most High is God. You know, and everything they have is do you know what I mean? It's artificial.
Yeah.
You know, look at the worship that we have, idol worship. You know, the worship of these celebrities, the worship of these superstars, politicians, or whatever you might do. You know, so many dirty people. They're valuing TVs over their own children and crap, really.
Yeah.
And the only thing that you have are your children. They're the most valuable thing you ever have. And they are absolutely draining the life out of them. The moment they abuse them, they are taking their life, they are shattering their soul, and they are destroying generation after generation after generation.
Yeah.
They say that abuse, it takes 3 generations for it to totally go through, because if your anger, you will, unconsciously impart that on your children by your actions and everything else. You know, the ability to really hold your kid and love it because you've been hurt and you can't. You know, I know people that can't even bath their own children, mothers that can't bath their own babies because the triggering that comes back, they can't change a nappy, and this is what they do. And of course that's going to hurt your child's never going to have that close to someone, and this is what these bastards are doing. You know, why are we letting this happen? You know, and this is the next level that goes at the top, and I don't know why I'm at the top, because really this is the bottom, this is the sewer, and I'm just relaying. I'm not naming names, but we said the royals, and these are globally, the ruling families,
the elites.
I think that will speak for itself. We know it's going, and again we are seeing stuff coming out and allegations being made, and probably the need to denotice. So that is it. That is the hierarchy, the pyramid. She said it should go in like a pyramid because it does get smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
And this is what feeds it. So from right down here, this is a need to protect our children at all stages, because these need feeding, and they will constantly need feeding.
Yeah.
You know, because people will die, people will move on. You know, so there's a need to keep this pyramid always topped up, and if we abandon our kids, then we believe what they tell us, and we're going to keep feeding it, and we've got to stop it. It has to stop, and it starts with us, each one of us, by going out there and saying no. Yeah. No more, and that's what we do. We say no more. You know, it's shocking. You know, if you even spend a day with us and listen to the phone calls of the damaged, broken people that are screaming out for help and for justice, and sometimes we feel so powerless. And then, of course, we're the ones that get in trouble. You know, we're the ones that the police want to shut up. We're the ones that get the D notices and then get evicted or imprisoned or whatever they do. And we see it so many times. For what? For doing the right thing. Yeah. It's just perverse, and it really is. So, I mean, that's sort of ultimately where it's ended up.
Yeah.
You know, and it's worrying. It's incredibly frightening. You know, it's just how it has evolved. And I always knew at some point this was going to escalate. I never realised it would be as big as what it is. And there's a very, very brave and decent human being. She's on the FBI's top 10 profiles, criminal profilers. She's got a book called Child Killers. Okay. Her name is Corinne Hutzabart. And I write her name down. Okay. I want to clean this because I don't want her in any way.
What you want, Johnny.
Anyway, Corinne, associated with this vileness that's on here. She is a human being and some, this woman, right? And I want to give her a huge shout out for what she's done in waking people up. And she's a Belgian lady, right? You know, there we go, nice Flemish name.
Is she a journalist?
No, she wasn't.
I'm on the wrong person. I'm back on the wrong tree.
Here we go, Corinne Hutzabart. Get her book, Child Killers. Corinne was the official profiler. She's on the FBI's list for the Mark de True. There's been numerous attempts on her life. She's been threatened, you know, on almost an annual basis, you know, that she's going to die. No, she doesn't care. She carries on. And she's the only profiler who works with offenders and with victims. She will spend 60% of her time with the offenders, which is unprecedented. You don't get that. Yeah. And the reason she does it, she's got no loyalty to them, but she needs to know their information.
Yeah.
Which is right. It is. You know, and I say to people, if you're involved in this, just stop and speak out. You know, you're going to hell. You know, and people might say you're making this a religious issue, John. I'm not. This is a spiritual war. Definitely. And it is, you know, they believe in their deity. You might get a Christian will spend an hour in church a week. They will spend hours and hours a night praying. And if you ever watch the account of, I think it was a James Wales show back in the 1980s, and they had the MP Geoffrey Dickens was speaking out against Satanism, and they brought in a witch, and she's actually divining, you know, against, Geoffrey during the interview, and then, you know, and then he was subject to sort of voodoo dolls, you know, pointing pins into him. It's unbelievable, you know, and so they will make the effort. I no doubt they've had rituals in my name. I don't know. I don't really care.
Yeah.
But it is.
What curses and stuff?
I would have thought something. I mean, I don't know. You know.
Actually, I know a comedian. I won't name him. And his mother taught him how to curse people, and he's cursed about 10, 11 people, and a lot of them have died and some with brain damage. It's actually kind of weird. But
I had a woman come to me, and she was a victim of satanic abuse, and she got involved in paganism, and she liked what I was doing, and you know, and she liked me, and she said, "I've done something really good." And I went, "Okay, what you done?" She said, "I've those that have hurt you, I've cursed them." And I went, No, I don't want you to do that.
No.
She went, "What do you want me to do?" I said, "Go into church and pray for their souls. Pray for them. Don't curse them. Pray for them."
There's the law of threefold return, and whatever you do in the universe comes back in that. The person who's cursed people, I'll just say, he isn't an happy person.
No.
You know what I mean?
I mean, they're ruined anyway, you know, for what they've done. And but we can draw this back, you know. The majority of people have had enough of this. But we need to see boots on the ground. Yeah. We need to see what Brussels done. I don't advocate violence, and I don't advocate any hatred and all that. But we have to say no more. In the name of decency, we need to stop this. It needs to be brought to an end.
Yeah. Thank you very much, John, for coming down here and sharing all this with us. Thank you very much. You made a bit of a trek from London to little old Wigan. Please check out the John Wedger Foundation on. Sorry as well. Thank you very much.
And if
look at this, it's even extra large, so it'll fit me.
Can we turn around, because there's this lovely guy, Stu, from here. He's done them out of kindness of his heart. If you want a t-shirt, PM us on John Wedger, Jon Wedger at gmail.com, and you'll get one. We'll post you one for nothing. And
also, we've got these natty wartime cups, the tin. What you can basically get off from John's site.
Yeah.
You can donate to John's site as well. If you want to donate to this channel, click the links below. I'll put all John's links below this video. Thank you very much for watching, and subscribe if you want the notification bells and all that. But thank you very much, John.
It's a pleasure, Jimmy.
Will you come down again?
Yeah, I'm going to have a Wigan kebab next time I come, aren't I?
I think it's a fallacy, the Wigan kebab. Do you, Colin? Southerners have made that up, haven't they?
Not much of a kebab, is it?
There's actually a shop in Wigan that sells pie kebab. I can't get my words out. I'm blown. My mind's
pies blown. In a bread roll. You call them balms.
You can actually, a place called Pemberton, you can get a pie full of kebab meat. I'll bring it next time you come. I'll bring you one. Well, but thank you very much, John.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. God bless.